Podcast, a special event today. As you can see, I've got Federal Senator, One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts, who's kindly agreed to come on and have a chat about all things One Nation. One of the reasons I've been pursuing people from One Nation is obviously their rise in the polls. But as a Victorian, as a Melburnian, with the upcoming state election, I think it's a really opportune time to try and get representatives from One Nation on this program and find out a lot more about them, and hopefully people who follow me, and we can share this far and wide, and we can get a lot more detail on what One Nation can offer Victorian voters in November. And hopefully we can get some centre-right conservatism coming back into Victorian politics from the end of this year, because we desperately need it. So welcome aboard, Malcolm. It was interesting to get past all our technical issues. For those who don't know, we've just had about 20 minutes bouncing up and down some issues with the connection. So if we do drop out, we'll get you back in as best we can. So welcome on board the Eureka Podcast.
Risky. I think both ends. Thank you very much, Bob. Good to be here, and thanks for what you're doing. We've got to have not only more conservative politicians in politics in Victoria, we've got to have more conservative independent broadcasters in public life in general. So thank you for what you're doing.
A pleasure, mate. It's actually been an interesting journey at my end because, mate, as you can see, I'm just your everyday Aussie, and I just got sick after the last election. I actually voted for nobody in the last election. That's how disenfranchised I'd become with it.
Was that the last Victorian election or federal?
No, the last federal. Okay. So we haven't had a Victorian election here for a while. So I'm your typical. To give you a bit of my background, then I'll ask a bit about yours. I don't know whether you know this. I was trying to find the conversation. It's another thing I've got to thank you for. Going back in the middle of COVID, I had a real issue. I can't remember what it was with, but it's that long ago now. But I sent out a bunch of messages via my ex account, which is different to the one I've got now, to a bunch of politicians, and you were the only one who replied. So now that I've got you live, I want to thank you for that, because I think that's one thing that gravitated to me towards you, David Limbrick, Jordan Ditloff. I think that's a big thing, because I email a bunch of politicians, and all you usually get is the automated messages. With you, I got about 3 or 4 messages. You really explained, tried to help out. Couldn't do much, but you gave me a bit of guidance. So personally, man to man, thank you for your help. And I think that's a credit to you. If you treat everyone like that, it'd be interesting. So it's a bit more...
well, you pay my wages, Bob, so I've got to treat you like that.
Well, a lot of the others don't take that approach, which we'll get onto later. So in the last election, I just got... I'm your traditional, I was a Liberal voter. After Turnbull got in charge, I dropped off the ship. I didn't like the way they got rid of Abbott because they got into power because they were going on about Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, and then just the whole net zero nonsense. And so I searched for another home for quite a while in the hope that I thought the Liberals would wake up to themselves and get back to what the old Liberal Party used to represent. The political wheel has come so far in the circle that I actually think you guys are more Menzies-like than what the Liberal Party is even close to. So in the last election, what I've been saying in the build-up to that election on my different little journeys, I wasn't podcasting then, but I was commenting, writing articles, is I would vote for the first minor party that came out that represented my values that I think could win government. And with the way you guys are going in the polls, I actually think, which is something I want to talk to you about, is an achievable ambition now for One Nation going forward. So now I don't want to get on board with any political train, but you guys are the party that best represent my views, are most supportive of a conservative point of view. And with that voice, hopefully we can convey that onto others. And I think this is why you're seeing such a flood. It's interesting with me. I just decided, well, if I'm not going to participate in voting for parties, I better get on the podcast scene and start putting my voice out there and expressing why. At the same time, you guys rose in the polls, so it's a sort of perfect don't know what the word for it is. You probably know better than me on this one. You're a much smarter guy. So it's just the perfect unison of you guys rising to the pile and me getting on the podcast. It's all just worked out nicely. So it's been an interesting journey. I've had some interesting conversations with all sorts of people. So I'm really looking forward to this one. So that's how my part came about. So, mate, just to get us started, why do you think the rise in the polls for your guys has come about?
Well, I don't think it's any. First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for what
pleasure.
you're doing. I don't think it's any one thing, Bob. It's many things over the last 30 years. I think the catalyst for it was the policies that were developed in the party, entirely in the party, and that were quite often copied by micro parties and by the major parties. And those that weren't copied were given reference in voice, so they were referred to topically, not as their policies. But the policies really resonated. And quite frankly, Bob, I've followed the Liberal Party for some time. I've watched the Labor Party. I've been interested in politics, but they were the best suite of policies that I've ever seen anywhere in Australia. We had 4 main themes. One was putting more money back in your pockets. Where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from shrinking government to fit the Constitution, saving $90 billion plus in waste. These are all fully costed. And then, so that's $40 billion back, more money in your pocket, giving the people their money back from the cutting of government spending, because we think the people know better how to spend it than the bureaucrats and the dishonest politicians. So that leaves $50 billion. $20 billion would go into infrastructure investment, so we can make future productivity, so that we can put more money back in kids' pockets, our kids when they grow up. And the other $30 billion was to start paying off the federal debt, because if we don't, then NDIS, if it keeps going, is going to be the biggest line item. But the interest payments on our debt is going to be the second biggest by a long way, far bigger than defence, far bigger than Medicare. So it's really in a problem. So we've got those policies, and the policies were about putting more money back in your pocket, all fully costed, as I said. And we can go through some of them, but they resonated with people. They were comprehensive, and they resonated with people, especially the ones putting money back in people's pockets. And they were genuine. They were well thought through. The second thing, I think, is that people have said at last that this is common sense. One Nation is simply talking common sense. The third thing is that people are really hurting. And the fourth thing is that people are waking up to the uni party. They're not offering any alternative. Liberal and Labor are almost the same thing. Their policies, if you have a look at them, Bob, they're identical underneath. Scratch them away. Apart from one or two, they're almost identical. Net zero, Paris Agreement, energy transition. In fact, all of these were started by Liberals. Every one of those 3 was started by Liberals. The safeguard mechanism started by Liberals. The CIS scheme started by Labor, but building on the Liberals. So there's no difference. And people have been voting Labor and then getting disenfranchised, and voting Liberal and then voting Labor and voting Liberal, thinking they're different. And now people have started saying, hang on, our country is going downhill. It's on managed decline. They're now working out a deliberate decline by some politicians in both sides of the uni party, both cheeks, as I say. So they're saying, hang on, what's going on? And COVID woke a lot of people up. They realized the government is not here to help, and they realized Labor and Liberal were both pushing the same bullshit. And then now they're starting to be really hurt financially, the energy transition, the policies that both the uni party are pushing. And so they're saying, hang on, these two are identical, and they've woken up. And so now they're looking for a real alternative, and One Nation's looking at them. And they've said now, Pauline Hanson's been saying what she's been saying, common sense, for 30 years. What they realised was that the media were on the side of the uni party. They were disparaging Pauline, sidelining her, squashing her, bad-mouthing her. Now they've realised it's a con, and Pauline's the only real alternative.
Yeah, no, I hear you on all of that. It's interesting, actually, when you bring up your policy suites, because in preparation for this discussion, naturally, I was pretty much across your policy anyway, because as you would understand, I'm a bit of a political junkie. But I thought I'd better get on your policy page and have a look at it. And credit to your people on your social media, whoever does that, every time they put out a subject, they then put the link for the policy page, which I think is very smart because you can easily find it if you want to search for it. So anyway, I got on there. It is interesting, the dig that you guys get from both the Labor, Liberal, Uni Party, as you call them, is that you guys don't have any policy. I challenge anybody who actually believes that to get on your policy page and then read through it, especially if you're a conservative like me. And they use conservative now as a dirty word. They call us far right. All these sort
far
of
right extremists, mate. Far right extremists.
Well, it's actually I'm wearing that label when I get it. I'm not far right, but when I do get it these days, I wear it as a bit of a badge of honour because it really means you're just centre right, you're conservative, and what you just said, your common sense. I'll give you my theory on where it all changed, especially with someone like my age. I'm just creeping the boomer stage. The poor old boomers cop a lot of flack at the moment, so I'm at the later end. So I was born in '63. So I was a Liberal voter all the way through. I voted for Hawke once, but most of the time I would vote Liberal, both state and federal.
Same as me. Same as me. I voted Liberal and Hawke once. Yeah.
Yeah. So and under Kennett and Howard, I thought, you're never going to agree with anything any government does. Even if you guys got into government, I'm probably never going to agree with everything. That's just humanly impossible. You can't. And if you start trying to satisfy everyone, you satisfy nobody. And I think that's what the Liberals have got themselves into trouble with. They've tried to be so Labor-like to get these stupid teal seats back. They haven't seen the opportunity in the outer suburban electorates, which I think you guys are seeing and where you're resonating, because it all comes back to common sense and having people that understand the grassroots problems of everyday Australians. The Uni Party looks down their noses at everyday Australians. Now, I was always clinging on to the hope that once they got rid of Turnbull, they would revert back to their old selves. So that was a small part of me. I'd pretty much given up, but there was a small part of me. For the sake of the country, we went back to more a Menzies sort of approach. All right. The net zero thing that Morrison brought in after going to Glasgow lost me. Dutton, I don't know what happened to Dutton in the election campaign. I always thought he was a man who would stand up for values and principles. He seemed to go to water, which was disappointing. But the other thing I think that everyone talked about, with the Bondi shooting and how they got all you guys, the Liberals tried to get all you guys coming back into Canberra. They said that was the issue and why so many people jumped off the Liberal Party. It is interesting what the media never bring up. I think the thing that will cost the Liberals so much big, where people like me just said, right, that's it, I'm with One Nation. And that was those hate speech laws. The fact that they actually helped to facilitate the passing of those hate speech legislation. And we're all going, hold on, and even with this ridiculous Royal Commission that doesn't mention radical Islam. And we're all going, we've just seen 15 people slaughtered, and it's not the radical Islamists. They don't care about hate speech laws. It's everyday Australians who are getting more big government, big brother legislation, and now we get a Royal Commission that is not even looking into the core problem, which is radical Islam. Yep. So that's when I've gone, right, enough. And if you go back to the rise in your guys' pulse, I think that correlates. But the bizarre thing is I don't see any media making that correlation between those hate speech laws and that Royal Commission into that. They all talk about how the Liberals brought back in everybody back to Canberra. We don't care. I mean, there's an everyday. In fact, I welcome it. Get back to Canberra. Work harder for your taxpayers' dollars. But when you put in laws that are going to impact on my life and the life of my friends and my family, you're going too far. And the same thing with this social media ban for the kids. It's going too far. Can you hold on one tick, Malcolm?
Sure, mate.
Yeah. Come on. Sorry, mate. My co-star had to get out the front for a toilet break.
German sentry, eh?
Yeah, you probably can hear him. Yeah, he's a funny boy. They're a beautiful breed of dog. Very intelligent, but by God, when he has to go out and it's like you've only got to get a possum walk across into the front yard. And if the military wanted good soldiers, German Shepherds, get a male with the traits of a German Shepherd because he's the best defence dog you ever seen. So I always say to people down here, If you're worried about crime in Victoria, buy yourself a German Shepherd. In fact, buy two if you can afford it. No one will come near your property. No one. And he's now come back in. So yeah, but that's where I jumped off, and the rise in your thing jumped off. And what I like about this is I think Australians, and this is where it's credit to Pauline and yourself, you've stuck true for a long period of time. And what we all see out there, and I don't want this to become like this whole conversation. This is just what I'm seeing, where it's a love in between me and One Nation. This is legitimate, and I think what a lot of people see is the consistency of your values and the fact that you've stuck by those values despite the attacks you get. I think this is the thing that a lot of people in the media and politics don't understand about Donald Trump, for example. Yeah. You might love or hate Donald Trump, but he's consistent. He sticks by what he's saying. I mean, for example, this whole nonsense, how they're trying to label him better run, he's been talking about that since 1980. With Pauline, back in 1996, I think she warned about Asians overrunning the country. Well, sorry, and I've got a different view on immigration to probably than most conservatives. But if you walk into Melbourne, you walk into Springvale, you walk into the western suburbs of Melbourne, you can't help but say Pauline was right. She's never changed a view or stance on that. She's been dead set right, despite the attacks that have come away, the far right, the bigots, the racists, and you guys have stuck at it. And I think that's something I know I've been searching for, and something many others. But I've been searching for one other thing, which will bring me probably to my next question. I've been searching for that party that speaks my values, that can win government. I'm just sure. I've listened to Pauline a little bit, and we'll get to your policy later on. This is one of the big questions I've got. The ambitions within the four walls of One Nation. Is it to win government or is it to win balance of power?
It's ultimately to win government. Well, it's actually ultimately to restore Australia and put us back on track, because we're in a managed decline under both the parties. The Liberals have been at it since Howard, and I mean that. I thought Howard was a hero. I worked out that he's one of the worst prime ministers we've had, but we can go into that another time. Yeah. But we've got to. Australia's been in managed decline, putting in policies from the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and forgetting about our country. So what we've got to do is restore Australia, stop the managed decline, turn it around, restore Australia. That's our number one thing. And to do that, we have to win government. Before we can do that, we have to get balance of power. And I think balance of power is the first step towards winning government, which is the ultimate for saving the country. So it is balance of power. I think we're not going to win 76 seats. 76 seats in the next election. So unless things dramatically fall apart for Liberal and Labor and more people wake up. So it's not off the cards, I guess, but it's going to be a big task. So balance of power, because what you'll see, you're an avid watcher of politics, Bob. What you'll see is that if you look closely at Australian federal politics, One Nation quite often is setting the agenda. You know,
yes.
When one of the really good things in the last few months has been Barnaby Joyce coming across, because he's had deputy prime minister experience, opposition leader experience. So he's very, very intelligent. What really surprised me, he's got an amazing sense of humor. He's very good on his feet. He's very good on media. But what really surprised me was he's a humble man. He's very, very respectful, very polite. But he's strong. And he said to us, the Israelis went into Iran on Friday, the 28th of February. On Monday, the 2nd of March, just 2 days later, he opened up our party meeting by saying, first topic, he said, we've got to get onto the fuel. We've got to get onto the fuel. It's a matter of life and death security. He said farmers, truckies. And so I raised that first in the Senate just a couple of hours later with question time. And I'll always remember Tim Ayres from the Labor Party, the acting or the representative of the energy minister, pointing his big ugly fingers across at me saying, you're nothing but far right extremists. Well, we've gone from the Labor Party accusing someone who raises the most important topic from being a far right being extremist to now being a fuel crisis in its own right. And we've led So I opened up on Monday. I opened up again on Tuesday. Pauline opened up on Tuesday. Sean Bell opened up Wednesday. Tyron Whitten opened up Wednesday and Thursday. Pauline and I opened up on Thursday again in the Senate. All of our senators. The National Party sleepily woke up about Thursday very late on the afternoon. The Liberal Party didn't wake up till the following week. The Labor Party was in denial until about 2 weeks later. And then all of a sudden, our issues. But meanwhile, once the Liberals picked up, we were on to the next step of the issue, how to deal with it. And then the next step. So we were influencing the agenda. The response to trans, it's not transgender because you can't change gender, but the trans movement was led by me and Pauline, and then some of the others got on board. Family law, Pauline Hanson. Pauline's led family law issues for the country for decades now. But there's so many other issues, energy, thing.
Yeah, I've still got you.
So we've been leading the agenda. We get disparaged, and then eventually the Uni Party, both cheeks of the Uni Party, wake up and they start following our agenda. They copy our policies, as I said in the last election. Dutton, Labor, micro parties copied our policies. So we set the scene, and we're still doing that. Can I mention before we go any further, the travesty that's happening to Ben Roberts-Smith?
I definitely had that coming up. Yep.
Okay, well, leave it till then. But that is disgraceful. They can't find someone who's done something guilty. They can't find a criminal. So what they're doing now, I believe, is setting him up. I mean, what's his name? The Office of the OSI. I've forgotten what the acronym stands for. The head man, the director. He's basically admitted there's no evidence. As reported, and they've set Ben up for being the culprit. They've spent $300 million directly on this case. They've spent another $200 million, according to the experts, indirectly. So $500 million. How many years, Bob? And they found not one person. They've got charges against two people, and that's it. And no guilty conviction. And so I think Ben is being set up. And the disgrace of the Australian Federal Police, who attacked basically a calm, confident person in public, and when they could have just said to him, "Come into the police station, we need to talk to you," or at least done it much more low key in front of his two girls, in front of his woman. That was just disgrace. They marched onto a plane in broad daylight and with an army of people there. That's just beyond the pale. That's disgraceful. We're going to stand behind Ben.
No, well said. It's I think, and I think you may have been on his past podcast, Sam Bamford, the two world podcast.
Yep, I've been on. Sam.
Yeah. What he spoke, how he spoke yesterday as a veteran, was amazing. And I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with everything that everybody says, but what he said yesterday resonated with me. I wanted to be in the military when I was a kid. Couldn't get it. I'm pretty much blind in one eye. But I've had family who served in the military. My dad fought up in New Guinea against the Japanese. Just listening to some of the stories of what they went through. The old fog of war. And to his credit, Joel Fitzgibbon from the ALP and McCormick from the Nationals spoke up really well this morning on behalf of Ben Roberts-Smith. So I think this is actually going right across in many ways. But the media are going to come after him. And I'll cop some flack for this, but the media, if you remember, treated George Pell in much the same way.
Yep.
Whether the guy was guilty or not, they just had him locked in as guilty and they went for the jugular. That guy, I can't remember his name, Mackenzie, the journalist from the ABC, he's a vile piece of work. To get his profile up, he will throw anyone under the bus. Now, if we're going to spend $300 million or $500 million, like you've just said, I tell you, if you've got the right marketing person down here in Victoria, we would have loved to see the federal government put $500 million into street crime down here in Victoria, where we're dealing with criminals every day of every week. I don't have a German Shepherd for security, but thank God I do. I mean, when I take him for a walk, because he's a rescue dog, right? he doesn't get along well with other dogs. With humans, he's fantastic. But if he sees another dog on a leash, he just goes aggressive. So I actually tend to walk him out in the middle. I'm one of these midnight walkers. You see the people walking their dogs at midnight because there's no one else out there. And it's just like when you're walking a dog who has a bit of leash aggression, you're getting that leash pulled off. It's very much hard work. So especially at my age. So I walk him at night. It's easier. But I've got this big steel rod that I used to use for my car bonnet to go up. I carry that with me wherever I go in Melbourne.
In Melbourne?
Yeah. I live in the Bayside area, and that's probably one of the highest rates of crime going around because the criminal groups, and I coach basketball, right? So I deal with all sorts of kids, and this has had a big impact on my position on immigration. I've coached Islamic kids, Jewish kids, Buddhist kids, Aussie kids, Asian kids, you name it, I've coached it. And it's led to some fascinating conversations. And with some of the boys I used to coach, the Islamic boys in Springvale, and you get a lot of really good life advice from these kids, is it's great you've got a dog, especially a big German Shepherd, because they absolutely petrified of dogs. But they said if you're living in Bayside, they're the areas they target because there's better cars, better property. If they're going to break into a place, they're going to get more value out of it. So the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne are a high target for these criminal youth. So you read about it all the time. The media don't pump it up enough. Chris Judd's wife talks about this all the time. She lives in Brighton. I think it's a red hot subject for that November election is crime on the streets of Melbourne. A lot of people are petrified of it. My next door neighbour, they're a lovely couple, worked all their life. They're in retirement. They're paid for their property. My dog comes out and they're up. They have a 2-story place. So they look over the top of mine. And when my dog comes out, they come out to their balcony sometimes and they hang out their clothes or do whatever they do. He goes off. He goes nuts. And I walk out to apologise and they say, Bob, we love your dog. We love it when he barks. He will scare people off. They're petrified about it. So there's a lot of people in the suburbs of Melbourne that are looking at this witch hunt of Ben Roberts-Smith and going, hold on, you can spend all this money on one man on a crime that you consider a crime when he was actually fighting for this country and its freedoms. Now, if you talk to anyone...
With valor.
Exactly. And he put his life on the line at your orders. Now, whether... This is going to sound really harsh. Whether there was some things done wrong or right, they're going for one man. There would have been other things done that by the letter of the law wouldn't be legal in other areas of warfare, other demographics. So like in Vietnam and World War II, blah, blah, blah. You send your young man off to fight for your country, ugly things are going to happen. Why are we going after one person, and why are we going after the person that's got the highest profile? What is that doing? He's the bigger picture, and I hope Ben Roberts-Smith gets off. Based on what they're saying about evidence, I think he will, which will be an absolute embarrassment for the government. But who knows with lawfare? But we're looking at a Joe Biden system where they're using lawfare to bring down people, I think, for an ideological battle. You're going after the alpha male here. This is sending an ideological message that this alpha male isn't what we need in our society. This is the progressive patriotism that I keep hearing Albo talk about. And I think it's actually a frightening term. So I've got big concerns on it. The message it's sending to young men. Why is any young man going to go off and fight for this country when they see the treatment of Ben Roberts-Smith? My last point on this, you compare the Americans under Donald Trump, what they just did. They had 2 pilots got shot down. They spent $300 million on saving those pilots and getting them back. They put hundreds of lives of their own servicemen who were willing to sacrifice that because their policy is leave no man behind. They would not put, and I've been reading some veterans from America on X today who all know who Ben Roberts-Smith is, and they're saying what we're doing to him is a disgrace. We're an international embarrassment for the way we're treating that man. He may have done something wrong. Sorry. He did far more right than wrong. There is a time you turn the other cheek. I mean, for example, I'll give you an example. All these media want to jump on international law and war crimes. What happened to the Japanese that used Australian diggers as bayonet practice in New Guinea? Did they ever face a war tribunal? Did they ever get charged for murder? None of that goes on. The guy that killed those 3 Aussie soldiers that Ben Robert-Smith came into, which led this incident, where's he today? Did he face any repercussions? No, he's walking around a free man in Afghanistan. So why is it always the Aussie soldiers? What's the Heston Russell? If it wasn't for them proving that the ABC manipulated that media, he could have been up on charges. Why are they targeting our military? And what's that going to do for patriotism? What's that going to do for the mindset of young men? We have young men now being drawn, something else I've actually got to ask you to, into groups like Groypers and NSN and Nazism and all this sort of thing, yet they're out calling you far right and me far right and Ben Robert-Smith far right. They're pushing these kids, our young men and women, they're pushing them into the hands, into the laps of people who are legitimately far right, and they don't see that they're doing it with their messaging. It's beyond bizarre. And credit to you and Pauline for standing by him. I suppose we just got to hope that the legal system will bring out the truth and he'll get off. I don't hold a lot of confidence in that, if I'm being brutally honest. I think he's being set up, and I think they're trying to message with all this. So I could be wrong. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I think the vast bulk of Australians are thinking that at the moment. And again, it just tears down. What's the other word that Albo likes to use? Social cohesion. You're putting Australians against Australians. You've now got a certain group of Australians that should be cheering this on. Then you've got a whole bunch of Australians saying, no, this is not right. Our social cohesion goes out the window. This is the problem. Again, an interesting one. I'd like to talk to you. I'm a big believer in immigration. I'm not a big believer in multiculturalism. Totally opposed to it. And I'm a big believer in vetting on immigration. So, mate, I'm right with you on Ben Robert-Smith. I think the way we treat what's the message it's sending to other veterans that fought in Afghanistan, by the way? What message are they receiving?
And Afghanistan's a different theatre of war. You can have kids in civilian clothes laying landmines, IUDs, whatever they call them, killing our troops. You can have an old man ploughing a field behind a horse or whatever animal they use, have a machine gun under his cloak. These are the kinds of things that our boys had to be, and girls had to be aware of. Now, Donald Trump has done 2 things amongst many others. He's not perfect. We know that. We've seen a couple of mistakes he's made recently, but his defense minister, defense secretary Hegseth, has said that he will call the armed forces warriors. He said that's what they are. That's their job. We don't like to kill people, but they have to at times. They have to go into a war. They're warriors. And what we do here is say, you want to change your gender. You can't do it, but you want to try to change your gender, become transgender. We'll pay for it. What does that do to morale when the person next to you don't know if they're capable or not? And the second thing is, look at the message Donald Trump sent to every single person in the armed forces when they spent hundreds of millions of dollars, destroyed incredible equipment as part of the operation to rescue that one person. He has sent a message to every single person in the armed forces in America: we will protect you. We will look after you. We cannot say the same in this country because they're destroying the fighting spirit of our warriors. They're destroying the mateship that I've been told repeatedly is the number one ingredient for our armed forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Well,
they're destroying it.
Well, exactly. And you've only got to look with Trump, with what Trump did. Tell me, by doing that, he's sending a powerful message. I've got your back. You compare what he did to what Biden did. All right, with the withdrawal out of Afghanistan. You telling me that nearly every single military personnel is not going to go and fight like crazy for Trump now? He's brought in a bit of that mateship you're talking. They know he's got his back. Hey, we can go in and get this job done. A lot of people are critical of Pete Hegseth. I'm pretty sure the Yanks aren't under the same agreements we are with these international tribunals. I think they pulled their people out so they could not get charged. We stupidly signed up for it. And one of the reasons I read on the weekend, which resonates, one of the politicians actually, was it Danby, Michael Danby? He's a good guy. He said the reason they're charging him is because if they don't charge him, the international tribunal that we set up to would. I think that's a flimsy argument.
I would question that, because I don't think they can charge without having the evidence, and that's what the Australians are doing now. They're charging without evidence.
Evidence.
That's what it seems to me. Yeah.
How can you go back 20 years? You're talking about you can't even do that normally. I wouldn't have thought in a criminal case in Australia. You're talking about going back 20 years to let's call it a crime scene. I don't know whether you can call it that. It's a battlefield basically. Where's your evidence coming from? Is this guy going to get sent to prison for life based on a theory, or is he going to get sent to jail based on evidence, on real strong evidence that he's committed some sort of crime? And the fact that they've put him up on 5 charges, I think that's a worry too, because if they miss out on 3, they might get 2. Is that the reason they've put him up on 5 charges?
Right. You know, I don't know about that, but I think he's been charged with killing 5 people. That's my guess, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on it. But the thing is, to lay a case for prosecution, you've got to have evidence, and I can't see them getting that evidence for the reasons you have just mentioned. Having said that, I think it's important that Australian soldiers and fighters recognize that they can't kill innocent civilians. I don't think Ben did it, and I don't think they've got evidence that he did it. So I don't think it's a matter of saying he'll get off. I don't think there's anything there for him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken long. If they had evidence, they would have used it a long, long time ago. I think this is 2 things. It's an ass-covering exercise, because the senior people are ultimately responsible. It's an ass-covering exercise. They're throwing people under the bus. And secondly, what they did to Ben, they timed it for the evening news. He was number 1 on every evening news broadcast. They're just getting the people to believe that Ben Roberts-Smith is guilty, and I don't think he is. But I will certainly oppose any Australian soldier who kills a innocent civilian, without justification. But I'll say clearly, I don't think there's the evidence to say that you can even prosecute Ben Roberts-Smith for that. And I want to see the evidence. But I think Ben's been badly done by it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
They put him through hell. I mean, why would you storm onto a plane that's on the ground in Sydney with his 2 daughters, 15, one of them 15? You know, that is just disgraceful. And then the army has the hide to say that they're a family-friendly outfit. What a lot of bullshit.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I'll tell you the other thing I think that resonates, well, for me, but I think for a lot of people like me, is let's flip that a little bit. Let's say Ben Roberts-Smith is guilty, right? Okay, if you can charge a military personnel, whether it's Ben Roberts-Smith or something else, for these crimes 20 years on, and this is not against you, why can't we charge politicians that create death? I mean, what happened during COVID where people were denied treatment and they died? What happened during COVID where people were given vaccines they didn't want and they had health repercussions of it? What about the businesses that went under because of all the ridiculous regulation? I had one business that nearly went under. What about the mental health of people that was badly affected during that, who took their own lives? What
about the 30,000 plus homicides from COVID injections? 30,000, more than 30,000 homicides from COVID shots. We know that's a fact.
Well, what about what's going on now? I was on Andrew Bolt's show yesterday. They had a guy that, and a lot of this is Ben Roberts-Smith has led into a lot of extra policy thing. They had a guy who had a company that had a proposal to turn coal into fuel and gas. And the silly energy minister down here, D'Ambrosio, she's just a joke. She knocked him back on ideological grounds. That was the reasons they gave him. He's now gone to New Zealand with the proposal, and they're backing him 100%. This is the sort of...
South Africa has been making oil from coal for, I think, 80 years. Certainly many, many decades. They survived on that oil from coal. Yeah. They made oil from oil shale in Lithgow, New South Wales, back in the Second World War. We've got so much oil shale. We've got so much coal, so much brown coal, making fine diesel. Oh,
We should be energy independent. So how many businesses, the truckers, businesses, local businesses, are now going to go under because of the price of fuel in this country? So my point is, if you want to hold our military accountable for their wrongs, when are we going to be able to hold our politicians accountable for the misery, death, destruction, all their crimes?
Well, look at there's one example recently, fairly recently, the Iraq War. We went into Iraq based upon the Prime Minister John Howard, the President of the United States at the time, George W. Bush, and the Prime Minister of Britain at the time, Tony Blair, saying there are weapons of mass destruction that we have to get and protect the world and save the Turks and save the innocent Iraqis. Weapons of mass destruction. We have hard evidence. 2 or 3 years later, the same three people are admitting there's never been any evidence. and not one, to my knowledge, not one member of Congress in America, not one member of Parliament in Australia or Britain actually held the Prime Minister or the President accountable. Not one.
No, it's a double standard that people see right through.
We put our young men and women at risk. I mean, that's reprehensible. They should be held accountable, all three of them.
You should go through my. I don't know whether you had the chance. You probably haven't.
And remember, what did we get from that war? What did we get from Iraq? What did we get from Afghanistan? We got the Taliban in Afghanistan driven out of power and then given power back. The country's gone backwards, and in Iraq, not much better.
No, it's
based on lies.
20 years of that whole. We're now going back a little bit. That whole Iraq Afghanistan thing, and this is obviously after 9/11. I mean, I think that just woke up a lot of people that you can't believe everything you get. And at the same time, we got the internet. It's funny though. The internet, I think, has done like a nearly 180, where you've got a lot of the podcasters now doing exactly what mainstream media are doing. They're picking things to suit an argument, to put forward an agenda. So we live in interesting times, and I think this is a thing. We've talked around a lot of things. I think the most important reason I got you on is I think this does open up, and this is what my attitude as a basketball coach, right? Going back to government, whatever. One thing I read years ago, when you're trying to motivate your players, is you can either get them to aim for the moon. It's an old saying, a Greek saying, and you'll hit a bird. If you aim for the bird, you'll hit a rock. And basically what it's saying, have high ambitions. Because if you have high ambitions, you get what you want. My concern a little bit for you guys, and this is why I would hope, and this is what I'm hoping continues to happen with the polls, that your ambitions will as quickly as the polls do, start to rise.
Oh, they are, because Bob, I can assure you that Pauline, just a few years ago, used to set people straight who came and said, we want you to be government. And she knew that was impossible at that time. And Pauline, above all, is truthful. Yeah. And the same with me. But now she is actively talking about government, and so did I. Now, I think that the realism means that you're not going to get it in one election. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't go after it in one election. We should put ourselves up as the alternative government. And in the 2025 election, Bob, I put One Nation up as the alternative government. Our policies were better than any Liberal Labor government, by far better. And so, and they started copying us. So, so I think we are aiming at the seat of government. But and what's more is a lot of people are now coming and saying, we want you as government. We want you as government. That's the measure of it.
I'm one of them. And I was actually saying, I was a member of the Liberal Democrats, and David Limerick, to his credit, explained to me the difference between a libertarian and a conservative. And this was during COVID. We had one of these on, and I don't know whether you know David well, but he's a man.
I don't know him well, but I like what he does, and I like as well.
He's a man of high integrity. He's a bit like you. He's came from, the business world. He's come in here because he was he was basically encouraged. He was grabbed. He does have libertarian values, but he does recognise other people's. But like the day we were on this online stream like this, and he was explaining to a lot of us who were gravitating at that stage towards the libertarians in Victoria or Liberal Democrats, and he could have easily just fed us a whole lot of bull, right? He didn't. He said, well, listen, conservatives are different to libertarians. And then he started explaining the difference and all that sort of thing. And I've gone, I've never really considered that, because I was saying a lot of things that I actually like. So I'm big on free speech, for example. I think both conservatives and libertarians are. There's some things that libertarians argue that I can't go with them on. Okay. And I got this from David. And after that, I decided, well, this is not my party. But because of what David said that night, I've always held David in high regard.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like what you're saying with Pauline. He will come out and he will say what he believes and he'll stand by it. So we need a lot more of that back into our politics, because a lot of the thing with social cohesion, what's driving the division within a community? It's so many within the political ideology and system that's driving that division. I mean, if you're looking for social cohesion, and I turn on the TV and I watch Question Time in either the Senate or in the lower house, you're going, well, they talk to us about social cohesion. They can't even have social cohesion in their own parliamentary chambers. It's kind of nuts. So, I mean, we've got to be able to get to a point with all these issues you're talking about where we can change it. So I agree with you. You probably, federally, I think you could surprise yourself. Let's get back. Let's talk state first, because it's one of the main reasons you got on. So I heard something recently that I was interested in. Are you guys a normal political party, or are you a proprietary limited company?
I don't know what we're structured as, but we're registered as a political party. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I think there are parts of our structure that are registered as companies, I think, but
right,
because we're very similar to the other parties.
That's what I thought. There was a media commentator said you're a proprietary limited company. I thought, can you even stand as a politician if you're a proprietary limited? It was interesting. So do you have, like the other political parties, do you have state branches, or is it just all done from a federal office?
No, state branches.
Right.
And they've got their own state executive, making ultimate authority rests with them. And we've now got branches in every House of Reps electorate.
So you're very similar in your structure, and I know they're not all the same, but you're very similar in your structure to other political parties then.
Yes. Where we differ is that we actually listen. When we go out and ask questions, we actually want to learn. That's why our policies were such a big resonation. Had so much resonated so well with the electorate, because we got the policies from the people. We literally got the policies from the people.
Yeah.
And so we don't. When we come up with a policy, it's not trying to look good, it's trying to do good. And that's the difference between us. What really disappoints me, Bob, with the Labor and Liberal Party is that they try to look good, not do good. And they'll screw it up. And that you look at housing, the Labor Party's really screwed things up, trying to pretend that spending money will solve the problem. It's making it worse. So they're trying to look good, not do good. They're trying to capture a headline. They're trying to look after their vested interests. They're trying to look after their mates, trying to look after their donors. And you can't do that. What you've got to do is be, Pauline was approached by the CFMEU some years ago and said, we'd like to give you some money. And Pauline said, that's fine. We'd love to take some money. But so long as you understand that your money won't change our position. We never got the money.
No, you wouldn't. I know a few guys in the CFMEU. They're actually good guys. I just question actually why the part. Sorry.
Bob, the turning point in the COVID mismanagement, the COVID fraud, and it happened in the worst state, probably for a reason, because they had their backs up the most, was the CFMEU rank and file in Melbourne.
Right.
Because they basically led the march, along with a lot of teachers and nurses. They led that march. That really scared the crap out of Dan Andrews. And when he saw their own rank and file tossing chairs and whatever they could get their hands on at Setka and his mates in the CFMEU headquarters, that really, really resonated across the country. So, I'm all in favor of unions. I strongly believe in them. I was a member of the miners' union. But you have got to have accountability, and there are too many big union bosses in big unions that say to hell with the workers. I've come across deals where the workers have been sold out on conditions, on wage rates, less than award wage rates, less than they're entitled to, by the union bosses doing deals with some of the grubbiest multinational companies in the world, right here in Australia. So the traditional union movement, wonderful. Good unions like the red unions in Queensland, for example, and some of the others, some of the big unions in Australia, wonderful. Some of the others have lost sight of what they're just now a funnel for getting funds for the Labor Party.
And keeping that, well, that's not serving us as well. Yeah, I think what you're saying, and the Liberal Party, I think they've lost this a bit. I think where the Labor Party has won this battle, and I agree with you on uni parties, but there's still a difference. I think what's interesting with the Liberals is I think you've found a lot of what's the best word to say? A lot of leftist influences embedding themselves in corporate life now. So on a lot of boards now, you have leftist woke, what's the word? The woke mind virus amongst a lot of our corporate entities, because they've gone through universities, they've been indoctrinated into all this, and what used to be a sacrosanct area for backing of conservative values has now become far more left-leaning. I think this is another part that's brought the Liberals more to a Labor-like position. So there's a lot to Scott Challen, who I think you've spoken to him.
I've got a lot of time for Scott. He's
a good man. No, I agree. And he talks about the lobbying influence in the corridors of power. And I think that's right. A big thing. And the everyday person can't have that same lobbying influence. Maybe through people like me and Scott and others, we might be able to get our voices out a little bit more so everyday Australians can get a voice in there somewhere. But you get the guy who's the billionaire that's in charge of AGL. You know his name. The guy, he's a greenie. And he changed. Was it AGL or another power company? He's got a hyphenated name. Billionaire.
Oh, you mean he's a billionaire in charge of Atlassian?
That's it.
Yeah, that's Mike Cannon-Brookes.
That's it. So he's pushing the renewables thing, and Australians don't get a say in that. So now you've got a corporate entity, a very rich man coming in and pushing down Australia down the renewable pathway, when below our feet we sit on a gold mine in all sorts of energy. I mean, we touched on it before. This country should be energy independent.
We're the world's biggest exporter of hydrocarbons, Bob. We're number 2 in coal. We're number 2 or 3 by a little bit in liquid natural gas. Combine the two, and we are the biggest exporter of hydrocarbons in the world. But we can't use the blessed stuff here.
Yeah. So on a bigger picture then, we've got so many restrictions, and it's great what you're doing politically. And let's give you a hypothetical. Let's say you win government. I think that's just the smaller challenge for you guys, because you've got a behemoth behind that government that you've also got to fight a war against, and that's the bureaucracy. How much of our institutions in our bureaucracies, and don't underestimate a bureaucracy. Look what they tried to do to Trump when he was out of office. How many people within our bureaucracy can you, if you made government, could you trust to implement a lot of your policy, especially, for example, on energy? Would you find resistance to going away from net zero, going away from all this renewable nonsense, and getting us back onto a mineral strategy, a fuel strategy, a nuclear strategy? Are you going to get resistance in our bureaucracies and institutions to your policies? And do you have a strategy to combat that?
Yes, we do to both. We will get resistance from the bureaucracy. We've already said that part of the identification of saving $90 billion plus in government waste and duplication is getting rid of the Department of Energy and the rest of the names they call themselves. That will save more than $30 billion a year directly. Get rid of all the schemes, the regulations, the parasitic subsidies for solar and wind, batteries, and all the rest of the rubbish that destroys our country. But it'll really open up productivity in this country. And when you increase productivity, no one's working any harder, but they're getting more for less. And that means profits will go up, wages will go up, and inflation will come down. Inflation will come down when you increase productivity. And so we're more productive. But that will remove $30 billion of government waste from spending, and it'll remove more than that in indirect waste, inefficiencies. So trimming the NDIS. I think the NDIS was a mistake. It should have stayed with the states because of something called competitive welfare, competitive federalism. And that's much more efficient. But Gillard made a mess of that, trying to win headlines. We want to get rid of completely get rid of the Aboriginal industry from the federal sphere. Send it back to the states. That'll save about $15 billion a year. The $90 billion is all set up. We want to save $1 billion a year from getting out of the United Nations and the United Nations World Health Organization. Bob, when I came into the Senate, I had a very good man. He's 20 odd years older than I was. He's dead now. But he said to me, he was with me on just about everything. He said to me, "Don't mention Agenda 21." I know why he said that. It's real. It exists. And it's destroying our country. And John Howard was the man who Keating signed the damn thing with the UN, but John Howard implemented it by far the most strongly across all of Australia. But I knew why he didn't want me to say it, because I'd be laughed at and ridiculed. Well, what you've got to do is you've got to stand up and say what you believe. So in my first speech in the Senate, I said, we need to get out of the United Nations and we need to stop Agenda 21. And now, 10 years later, both are part of One Nation policy. And I was one of the first to say get out of the UN World Health Organization when COVID came along, because they'd mismanaged COVID. So that's part of our policy as well. So, you've got to tell the truth, and you've got to stand by your convictions.
No, one thing I've always struggled with my entire adult life, really, the simple question I put to people who support it, they can't really understand it. What is the purpose of the UN? I mean, I don't.
Easy. That's easy.
Agenda 21.
Well, partly it's to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. That's their words, not mine. I'm just using their words. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Goals, and all the rest of the rubbish they come up with. There's no substance to the UN. That's what it's there to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. And Maurice Strong, the psychopathic criminal who started fabricated fraudulent climate claims, he wants it to raise money for himself. He started the Chicago Climate Exchange, where they have been trading carbon dioxide credits, which are bogus. So he wanted to become a billionaire, but he also wanted to raise money to give the United Nations independence from the United States, which gives it most of its funds. The United Nations, one of the best things that I've heard came about the United Nations a couple of weeks ago. Someone told me it's just about broke. And the United Nations is also about control. But the when I first started researching climate change, because I'm educated in atmospheric gases, I knew that it was bullshit what they were claiming about carbon dioxide. But then I thought I better check. So I went right through the science. It is bullshit. So when I proved that the science was crap, and that there are many, 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 many times more scientists who are opposed to it than to support it. So we've been fed bullshit about the consensus as well. Once the science was settled in terms of understanding there's no science there pushing this rubbish, then I said, who's driving it? And that led me to the UN. And then I said, well, what's the motivation? It's all about making money and controlling people. And that's for the BlackRock, Vanguard, State Streets, and the big banks. They're basically the beneficiaries of this lot. And every time they are, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, the large wealth funds, they all have integrated ownership. BlackRock own bits of Vanguard, First State, State Street. They all own bits of pieces of each other, and they're a self-controlled entity with a couple of big wheelers behind. So that's what it's all about.
They sound like hillbilly cousins. They're all married to each other. But
well, they're certainly bastards. They're certainly bastards, and they're certainly inbred, and they're certainly misfits.
Well,
and they're not human.
Well, the whole UN. I mean, even if you take all that out, the whole UN, where you might have I'll just give these numbers. I don't know whether these numbers are accurate. You basically got 7 major members who can veto anything, right? So if the other 171 countries come up unanimously with something they want, but 1 or 2 of those countries veto it, doesn't get ahead. What sort of organisation operates like that? That is a dictatorship. Then you've got these human rights councils.
But actually, Bob, it's even more subtle than that. With the United Nations, they have said that they want to model their structure for global governance on the European Union. The European Union was set up in a similar vein to the United Nations.
Yeah,
people think the and they're elected, but they've got no real power. The people behind the scenes in Brussels wield the power. It's not democratic at all. And the United Nations is no different. It's not democratic. People like Maurice Strong, who's dead now, he fabricated the climate change bullshit. He's a psychopathic criminal who tried to make billions for himself and set the UN up for life. What he's done, he's dead now, but that's now starting to fall apart. And Keir Starmer in Britain, the Prime Minister, is pushing the climate fraud. He admitted the other day, just recently, a couple of months ago, that climate catastrophism is collapsing around the world. We'll still push it, he said, but it's collapsing around the world. People are starting to wake up. And why? Because they realize what they've been fed a line.
Don't know whether we're waking up as much here. What did the ALP go? That we want to become a renewable superpower. I mean, what the hell does that even mean?
Shh. The 82% target for solar and wind?
Oh, yeah, it's disappeared.
It's gone. Quietly dropped.
Yeah, but you know what hasn't gone is their desire to keep pouring billions into these renewables nonsense. So
and
they might take.
They've taken them off. They've taken them off the balance sheet, off the books, off the budget books. They've made them secret now, and that's open. It's an open secret that you cannot get the costs that your money is going into supporting these subsidies for solar and wind and CIS system, capacity investment scheme. That is off the books. And what they're setting up, we believe, and that there's strong questions about this, they're setting up their mates to set up companies and then be bought out by shelf companies, and they'll make billions for nothing.
And the taxpayer gets back an energy grid that just delivers much more expensive bills to every household.
Yep. And destroys jobs in this country. We export our jobs to China. We destroy the environment. Solar and wind are killing the environment, killing farmland. We're destroying our food security, raising the cost of electricity, raising the cost of farming, raising the cost of pumping water, raising the cost of manufacturing. We're killing our country for nothing. No. What's the saying now? Someone in our office came up with it. Killing the environment to save the environment. Killing the environment to protect the planet. It's all bullshit.
No. The moment they started under Gillard, and it goes far further back than that. I mean, if you could go back 30 years and say, can we take a different approach and put all the billions we're about to waste on renewables into the energy sector properly? What sort of energy grid would we have that could support industry, farming, business? We should be and people will argue against this, but we should be a nuclear-powered country 30 years ago. We've got the biggest stocks of uranium, and this is where Dutton was right, but the silly bastard didn't argue it. He announced it, and that's the end of it.
Well, we said in response to Peter Dutton's call to discuss nuclear, we said, at last, we've been advocating that for years. Good, let's discuss nuclear. That's wonderful. But you're doing it for the wrong bloody reasons. You're reinforcing the climate fraud. Saying we need to do this so we don't produce carbon dioxide is not the right thing to do. Bob, we don't push any form of electricity generation, only one criteria: it's got to be the cheapest.
Yeah.
That's any country that has the cheapest power. Australia had the cheapest electricity in the world before we started this mad, insane push. Now we've got one of the most expensive, and South Australia in particular is the most expensive in the world. But let me ask you a few questions.
Yeah, sure.
Whose government sold out to the United Nations and implemented the most far-reaching climate energy regulations, now gutting our electricity sector? Which Prime Minister?
I'd say it'd be the Howard government towards the end of his term.
Correct. Who brought in the renewable energy target, the RET, which have driven electricity prices sky high, reduced reliability, security, and stability?
Could be wrong here, but I would have thought it would have been either Turnbull or Morrison.
Howard. Whose government stole farmers' property? Yes, this is a really important one.
Yeah.
Whose government, which Prime Minister's government stole farmers' property rights to comply with the UN Kyoto Protocol, the climate protocol? They stole farmers' property rights. I can go into detail if you want. Whose government did that?
The moment you say Kyoto, that'd have to be Howard too.
Yep, you're right. Whose government, who was Prime Minister that created the National Electricity Market, an NEM?
I don't know the answer to that one, but I'm assuming
John Howard. Whose government was the first? Who was the leader of the party that had the first major emissions trading scheme, a carbon dioxide tax? Who was the leader of the party at the time?
That actually implemented it, the carbon dioxide?
No, they didn't implement it, but they were the first to propose it.
Oh, that'd be Howard.
Yeah, it was.
And
everything else. That's the fundamentals right there.
I'll give you one question right back. Why did he go down that path?
Why? Oh, there are many possible answers. I don't know what's in his head. Possibly to comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol, which he said we will not sign, but we will comply with. He said that publicly. Secondly, Keating signed the UN Agenda 21. He implemented that. He pushed that for all it's worth. It could have been because Rudd did such a fine job of bullshitting about climate and calling it the greatest moral. Greatest moral
challenge of our time.
Thank you. Yeah. And he had to come up and then support it. And that's what I mean. You talk to decent liberals. There are a few of them. They don't buy this bullshit, but most of them support it because they're afraid to do it and to go against it. So people talk about Australia's problem is the same as most Western countries. We've got too many sheep in the country. The sheep infect Parliament House, Bob. Yeah. People don't realise that, but they're sheep in Parliament House. They follow what they're told.
Well, let's get on another subject. I want to get on here. We're ticking them off without me even getting to them, which is beautiful. Let's get back to some quick questions on the Victorian state election. From what I'm seeing on your policy website, basically your federal policies are going to be your state policies. Am I missing something there? Or do you have a specific set of policies for the state election coming up as well?
No, we have specific policies for each state as well.
Okay.
They're not as extensive because we haven't got the depth of people there yet, but it's building all the time. If you look at South Australia, there were policies that were federally carried into the state, but also specific state. Carlos Caremba, Cory Bernardi, Rebecca, they developed some fine policies with the help of people in headquarters, party headquarters. Sorry?
No, I think we had a little bit of lag. Speaking of Cory Bernardi, do you have someone similar lined up to start heading One Nation in Victoria? Because I actually think that's something you need, a public face.
Yeah, we've got a very good leader of the party in Victoria, ex-military man, former a vet. He's very, very good. Got his feet on the ground, so we're very happy with him. Yeah.
Okay, because the issue I see here as a Victorian down here, I think everyone is salivating for another option other than the Liberals and Labor. We've had enough of both of them. And And look, I don't like a lot of her policies, but I think as an operator, I think Jess Wilson has been half all right. The problem is the party below her are an absolute chaos shit show. And I think anybody trying to lead that party is in for a nightmare. And what's the old Bob Hawke saying? If you can't govern yourself, you can't govern the country. I think that's pretty appropriate. And if you're going to, I hate a lot of what the ALP do, but at least the one thing the ALP are, they're disciplined. You might hate them, but they have that trade union movement under them. They don't sabotage each other on the whole. They've been far more disciplined since the Gillard-Rudd years than the Liberals ever could hope to be. So I just think you need the profile somehow to grow in Victoria, because over the journey the last 30 years, One Nation in Victoria has been pretty much a non-entity. But now everyone's looking for something else. And if you can get something to grab the attention like a Cory Bernardi, I think that would go a long way to boosting your hopes for the upcoming election. I actually think it could surprise yourself, because the one thing I do think too, especially what happened here in Victoria, the real poll numbers I don't think are always the true poll numbers. So when they bring out a poll number and say you guys are going at 21, I would say you're probably going at 25. Because a lot of people in those polls aren't going to say, yeah, I'm going to go vote for One Nation or whatever. So I just think the numbers might not be in the poll showing up as strongly as what they actually are. I think everyone here is totally sick of the Liberal Party, which if you had told me that at the end of the Kennett years, I would have said, no, that won't happen. But here we are. So we don't want the Labor ALP government. We actually don't want an LNP government. But the profile of One Nation, everyone's going, we want to go One Nation. The issue I see for you guys, how are you going to convince Victorians down here to put you guys number one?
Well,
if you don't have that profile.
If we go back, Warren Pickering, I don't think I mentioned his name.
Yeah, no, Warren. Yeah, I've talked to Warren on X a bit. Hopefully I can get him here for an interview at some stage.
Yeah, he's a really down-to-earth guy. He's the leader of the party in Victoria.
Yeah.
He almost got in as a senator.
Right.
Clive Palmer spent tens of millions of dollars in Victoria and just barely beat him. So I think with the higher profile, he's a very good...
So who did he lose out to? Senator Babette, did he?
Yes. Just by a very small number of votes.
Damn.
And Ralph was a member of One Nation, as I understand it.
Was he?
He invited me to the to his first dinner after he made his first speech in Parliament House.
Yeah. So, that's interesting.
Yeah, but Clive funded his campaign for him, so he switched.
So why, on a segue on that, why has Clive got it in for you guys so much?
I don't know. I don't know what's in Clive's head. I don't think anyone does. Maybe not even Clive at times. But Clive, he's very good, very affable. He's very intelligent. He gets bored, it seems to me, at times. But he maybe I'm just ego seems to drive some people. Sadly, in politics, maybe he's looking across the road and he sees Pauline Hanson with 4 members in the Senate and federal Parliament with huge poll numbers, doubled in the last election, now way ahead of that. And she just barely scratches together 2 pennies to fund a campaign. Here he is, spends $100 million and barely gets one person in. And then it may also be that he's lost his reputation as a politician because everything he's touched in politics has gone to custard. And he's, instead of building a party from the grassroots and connecting with the people, what he does is he's done this on a number of occasions. He's gone in and tapped someone who's already in a party and got them to defect. Why? Because you only need a small number of people to register the party as members if you've got a member of parliament. So he's taken the lazy way, and that people can see that, and they're sick of it.
His latest, I roll my eyes at his latest ads, and initially I liked what he was doing, but he sounds like I don't know whether you remember him. There was a guy in West Footscray. He used to have the adverts on TV, and Clive is actually really starting to sound like him because he used to repeat himself at the end of his ads. if you watch Clive's latest ads, he's repeating himself at the end of his ads with these thing. And I thought, if you're being smart, Clive, don't be on your ads. Put someone else on them. Because I think it's a bit of it's a bit sad because it's a bit of a waste. I mean, for him, it's not a lot of money. For everyday Australians, it's a huge amount of money. But that money could have served Australia so much better in his advertising, what he's done. And it's one thing I hear all the time from everyday Australians. I think one thing they've been salivating, I think it's in the past now because of your polling, is why couldn't the centre-right parties all join up and align? You all have very similar views. Why couldn't you create one force that would give us that option?
Right, and the other thing I didn't mention, a couple of things. Carlos Caremba did a lot of good work as the party president in South Australia.
Yes,
he built the policies with others. It wasn't just him. He had some good help from headquarters in One Nation, but he had some very good help on the ground in South Australia. It's really built up. Now, Carlos, my understanding is that when Cory Bernardi became available, said, stepped aside, said, go for it, please, because the name. But what we've got, we've already got a very good member of parliament in Ricky Lee Tyrrell in the Legislative Assembly in Victoria. She's really building bridges. She's starting to become more active on social media, more active in getting around promoting. But she's been very, very good. She's quiet in some ways, but she gets around and does the hard work on the ground. And she also builds bridges to connections with other members of parliament. And people know where she stands. So she's not going to compromise herself at all. But she's doing a bloody good job. So
yeah, I'm speaking to her about coming on. I've had a few of your guys now. Thanks to Shanna. She's been very good and put me on contact. So I'm looking forward.
Ricky's good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to them after we've had our discussion. So if we wanted to find Victorian policies from One Nation, are they available at the moment, or are they things you're going to be announcing in the lead up to the Victorian election?
I think probably announcing closer to the Victorian election, Bob. I'm not aware of any built specifically. Ricky Lee Tyrrell has been pushing water, pushing regional development, regional priorities for years now. So, but I don't keep on top of the policies in other states.
Okay. Well, I'll bring that up with her because certainly Victoria's got a number of issues we've got to be dealing with. And of all the states, I actually think there's a lot of scope for One Nation, not maybe this next election. I think you'll do well. You'll do better than you've ever done. Whether you can win a balance of power or enough seats to have an influence is another thing, because that's a huge jump. I mean, what you guys are doing now is historic. For you just to get credible numbers like you did in South Australia, even if you didn't win a seat, that would be historic. Because, to be blunt, One Nation has not been a blimp on the radar in Victoria in my entire lifetime. So I'm loving the polls that are coming out now. And if we can get a few One Nation people, my hope would be you get a few One Nation candidates in the upper house and you work with people like David Limbrick, and you can form some sort of balance of power. Very hard to achieve that balance of power in the Victorian upper house because the ALP have a lot of their little minor parties that they form and get selected. So it's very hard to get that balance of power. And I think David would vouch for that. He's been fighting the good fight there for years, but just goes through, and these little minor, but like the Animal Justice Party, that's an ex-ALP person who runs that, and he'll just rubber stamp every bit of ALP policy that comes through. So there's a lot of challenges for who, if it's not the ALP, if let's say the LNP win government, there's still a lot of challenges for them to get legislation through to address the problem. So the other issue probably that a lot of people have with One Nation, your candidates and vetting, okay? If we're voting for candidates down here, what assurances can One Nation give us? So, for example, was it Sarah Game she was a One Nation candidate, won election under the One Nation banner, but then formed her own party in South Australia? What guarantee? You can't give a guarantee, but what assurances can we have that One Nation people we vote to represent us through One Nation stay One Nation in Victoria? Have you done anything to try and fireproof that?
Well, you look at Fatima Payman, elected under the Labor Party, now independent, People's First or whatever it was. You look at Corey Bernardi was elected under the Liberals, defected to form his own party, and now is with One Nation. So we've got them on all facets
All sides,
of policy.
100%,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's and we have got a very, very strong candidate vetting process now. It's made really rigorous. It's very thorough.
So what have you
But
changed
humans are humans.
on that? What have you changed? I hear One Nation, and this is why I've come to people like you to get inside the four walls of One Nation, that you've become far more professional in this area and in a number of areas. What's changed within the party? You've been there nearly from day one with Pauline. So how have you changed things to make it more professional, to make sure that vetting is going to be spot on, so we can be assured we're going to have candidates can take our values into Parliament? If we're going to vote for them, I want to know I'm going to have people like yourself and Pauline that will fight for my values in that Parliament. What have you changed inside those four walls?
Well, one of the first things, we've got more people for a start, and
Yeah.
that's increased dramatically in recent year or so. Much more professional, much more fundraising. Much more fundraising. Thanks to James Ashby, done a really good job of fundraising, and we still get so much money from our small compared to Liberal and Labor, so still tight, but we get a lot of donations from the people, dollars there, that sort of thing. So that's hired more staff. Plus, we've got a very, very committed, because we're small, we've got and fresh and quite frankly, Bob, a lot of people telling us we're the last hope for Australia, and I believe that firmly. Our people in head office are very, very dedicated. So, and right throughout, they're dedicated. When I first joined One Nation, I was speaking at climate rallies and so on, and addresses, and I caught the eye of Pauline, and she said, "Have you thought about running for One Nation? Would you stand beside me in the Senate? I need a good speaker, a strong person beside me on the floor of the Senate." I said, "No, I'll ask my wife." So I asked my wife. She said, "You're pushing this climate fraud. Go for it. Go for it. Expose the climate fraud. It'll be good for you." So I said to Pauline, "Okay." My wife said yes, and Pauline said, "Well, let's sign you up." And I said, "Whoa, hang on just a minute. I want to talk to you first."
Yes.
She thought she was going to get a 1 hour chat. 11 and a half hours we finished. It was about 10 o'clock at night, but there was no one on earth who could have held One Nation together in 1998. It just went from 0% in the polls to 23%.
Yeah.
Peter Beattie came after her in the Labor Party in Queensland. John Howard came after her in the Liberal Party in federally. They combined, they worked together, they jailed her, they told lies about her, they told people that she was racist. She hasn't got a racist bone in her body. One Nation is called One Nation. We don't have Black Nation, White Nation, Yellow Nation, Asian Nation. We have One Nation. It's the complete opposite of racism. And so they told lies, they jailed her, and then she was let out on appeal, quite rightly so. What was the other thing? They did, oh, that's right, they changed the voting system to stop her, but they stifled her in so many ways. But the growth, Pauline did just about everything.
Yeah.
She has some loyal supporters, but they weren't professional. They were just cobbled together. But now we've got professionals doing it. And when we've learned mistakes, just like all the parties have, about dual citizenship, I'm guilty of learning that mistake, even though I wasn't dual citizen at the time. I just didn't do it correctly at the time of nomination. But what we've got now is a very strong vetting process, and we've got branches being set up. Pauline refused to have branches because that was the other thing. The Liberals and Labor members infiltrated our party branches and destroyed them from within. Now, Pauline was opposed to branches after that, but now she's got to the point where she realized we've got to have branches. And so we've very quickly set up branches. Now it's about increasing the professionalism of those branches and giving them more leeway to run their show. Farah, have a look at Farah. Farah, we had 81 applications to be the candidate. 81. And that was whittled down by basic criteria by head office, and then got down to a smaller number. Then that was whittled down to 3. And we put those 3 fine candidates to the party members in the branch at Farrer, and they selected David Farley, who's an outstanding candidate and doing really well. But the point is, we've got much more professional. We've learned from mistakes. Pauline doesn't like mistakes, but she's admitted. And when we make mistakes, when she makes mistakes, when I make mistakes, we bloody will admit it. There's no point in trying to hide it. So it's very open that way.
Have you guys, talking of lawfare against Pauline, have you guys developed some sort of, my fear for Pauline, these hate speech laws, when she came out, for example, with the Muslim comment, which was totally taken out of context, I think.
Well, not only taken out of context, it was a flat out lie. She didn't say what they claimed she said.
But the problem is going forward, and the bigger she becomes a threat. I mean, there's a side of me says that a lot of that hate speech laws was put in because they saw One Nation coming. Now, they're banking on that Pauline will say something they can construe that they could charge her with. That's my fear for all that. Have you guys developed some sort of fireproof strategy to make sure she doesn't expose herself to that, to make sure, because I think it's something she needs to be careful of, because I wouldn't, it's all right that you're overwhelming the Liberals. But they're nearly at an extension level event, really. But Labor are a lot more cutthroat than the Liberals. If they see that you're a threat to their handles on power and government, I think they'll be far more ruthless. And they wouldn't hesitate to have Pauline, if they could get the chance, to throw her in jail and deregister the party if they could. Have you got any strategy to counter that sort of thing? Have you thought about that stuff going forward?
That could be a possible strategy from the Labor Party to nobble Pauline. But I think there's something that'll stop that automatically. When Malcolm Turnbull said in the 2016 election that Pauline Hanson is not welcome in the campaign, he said Pauline Hanson is not welcome in Canberra, it really backfired. It really backfired. She got elected, and I came in on her coattails. What people are realizing now, and the Liberal Party is just barely woken up to it. If you attack Pauline personally, after what she's been through, and now that the people are awake and say she's been saying this all along, she's been the only one who's telling the truth. If you attack her now, it comes back on you. And the Labor Party senator for Queensland, one of the senators, Murray Watt, said so much the other day. He said, we will not be attacking Pauline because it just builds her support. So that I don't think that's a concern. What they're trying to do is tell lies about us, saying we haven't got any policies while they're copying our policies, saying we haven't got any direction while they're copying our direction and they're copying our initiative. What they're also doing is, remember, the Labor Party and Liberal Party have been in government on and off, each alternatively for about 7 decades. Who decides the government funding for advertising in the major mainstream media, the mouthpiece media? Labor Party, Liberal Party, Labor Party, Liberal Party. Who does the mouthpiece media support? Labor Party, Liberal Party, Labor Party, Liberal Party. And so that's the big issue they've got there.
You notice
they're lies.
Are you noticing a shift there, though? And the reason I say that, it's a small shift. So Chris Orman on Sky News, I think he's a good journalist, isn't he? And
he's very good.
Exposing the renewable stuff is brilliant. I can't remember his name, but he used to be on 9 News on 60 Minutes, but he confronted Bowen today, and Bowen didn't like it. And I actually sat back and go, oh, God, he's confronting Bowen. I would never have picked it. I picked him on the left. You're just sensing that some in the media are starting to come around, and I'm just wondering whether it's a rise in your polls. They're actually now saying, hey, we've got to treat One Nation with a bit of more credibility.
I think that's a very good observation, Bob, because the media does not want to get offside with the people because it destroys their credibility. Trump destroyed them in America. But there's something else really significant going on. In Queensland, I've been in polling booths and pre-polls from inner city Brisbane, which is largely Greens territory and Labor Party territory, to Cape York, Aboriginal communities, and everything in between. In the inner city, when you hand out how to vote cards, people walk up to you and just take it, or they don't take it. And then they walk out and they look around. And if you and then if no one's watching, they'll go, I voted for One Nation, okay, but they won't broadcast it. If you get to the outer suburbs of Brisbane, Strathpine, etc., as they're walking up to get a how to vote card, they'll say, "I want one of yours." They're proud of supporting One Nation. And if you go into the bush, in the regions in Western Queensland and Northern Queensland, from 10 meters away, they'll say, "Only One Nation for me." And that's it. And they'll tell the others to bugger off. So what's happening now is that more and more people are not hiding that they're supporting One Nation. They're proud they're supporting One Nation. And that's building, because that's why they called her a racist. That was why they lied about her calling her racist, was that if people did not come out and say, "I voted One Nation," then people would think the support is small. But it's now so big that people are now proud to be saying they voted One Nation, and that's a huge change. They've basically said, "Up yours! You've been lying to us, Uni Party, Labor, and Liberal Party, and the media, and we know Pauline is decent. She's the only one who's been consistent."
Well, it is interesting.
So they're now seeing that, and that's a huge, huge shift.
Yeah, I think the labelling of racist and far right, I think they've lost their impact on people. I mean, if you want to start labelling racist, and this is another thing we're about to get into, is the fact that our Prime Minister goes into a mosque, gets abused, then comes out and lies about it and says, "Oh, no, it was all okay." I mean, isn't that openly being racist against everyday Australians who got concerns about radical Islam? And yet here he was accosted by a mob of men. And I think there was one you can overhear say, "Let's hang him." I mean, he was openly attacked, him and Burke, and they come out and they keep pushing this immigration thing. And the problem with the political class, the uniparty class, who sneer down their noses at us, they think we're not smart enough to figure this out. We know why they're bringing in these certain demographics through immigration, and that is to basically branch stack their own electorates to make sure they can't lose them. They are fireproof. That's why they're bringing them in. But at the same time, these idiots that sneer down their noses at us don't realise the more they bring in, it's only a matter of time before they target them.
There's something else too, Bob. I think you're absolutely spot on. And the people are waking up to them. And they're waking up now. They initially woke up to the Liberal Party. Now they're waking up to the Labor Party. The Labor Party vote in South Australia with the most popular premier in existence anywhere in Australia, Malinauskas, went down.
Yeah.
If you look at Albanese, he had a huge majority. It's a lie when he says they've got a mandate. 34% of Australians voted for his government. 34%, barely 1/3. That means 2/3 did not vote for his government. He's got no damn mandate at all, but he's got a huge number of seats out of that minority vote.
So since you raised that,
he should have been right on top with political capital. Bondi, his lying, his weakness, his dishonesty, his contradiction of the facts, saw a huge decrease in his vote. It just plummeted. He's now got a very big negative approval rating, a disapproval rating. The booing he got at the Bondi Memorial, Sunday after Bondi, just resonated right across the country. People can identify with him as being weak and gutless and dishonest.
But then the Liberals barred him out with their hate speech laws. But then the Liberals barred him out. If they hadn't passed through those hate speech laws, Albo, I reckon he would have been changed by now. He was losing it. But the anger shifted from Albo to Susan Ley and the Liberals.
Yeah,
because they helped pass through those hate speech laws.
Right, and look at the Voice. That was a complete balls up, complete mess, complete failure. He misread entirely. And then when he launched the referendum campaign, he launched it with no facts, no data. He launched it with the vibe, a feeling, and he tried to con Australia. People have woken up that he doesn't respect Australians. He thinks we're gullible. He thinks we're stupid. We're ripe for the next. Right to be plucked.
But that voice con. Sorry for a thing. That's still going on. I mean,
Yeah.
if you voted no, you won the referendum. But now we've got a second chamber in Victoria. We've got a second chamber for Indigenous people in South Australia, where barely anyone turned up to vote for people. They're talking about it now in South Australia and West Australia. So you might not get it federally, but we're going to get it in every state. Unless
that'll come apart, Bob. I wouldn't worry too much about that. So long as you keep speaking out, that'll come apart, because in South Australia that was a campaign issue made by One Nation. Same in Victoria, it'll be a campaign issue, and the people of Australia are saying, "Hey, what's going on?" That'll be one of the things that'll fall over in the near future.
Well, let's hope so. I think it's got to go a lot further than that. I think it's also got to go past those chambers and into the whole Indigenous industry. We all want our Indigenous people to flourish in this country, to have good health, all that. But having this Indigenous industry is not helping them to flourish, because others in this country, the majority, a lot of them, resent them for having these handouts and everything handed to them. We've got to find a way to help these people stand up on their own 2 feet, and have pride in what they're doing, and to be able to sit shoulder to shoulder with us and say we're proudly Australian. I think one clear example of that is this 3 flags nonsense we've got. We've got one flag, the one sitting over there. I don't think I'm getting in camera. There we go. That's our flag. That represents me, represents you, it represents every Indigenous person. It represents every gay, straight, black, white, Asian, whatever person you are. If you love this country, that flag is for you. And Albo is creating division every time, and his ministers, they stand in front of 3 flags.
Well, it's even worse. It's even worse, Bob. What they're doing is they're creating victims.
Yes.
They're creating victims. And when you've got victims plastered all over you, you become a victim, and you have victimhood. And then you lose your sense of will. You lose your sense of responsibility, your sense of being able to look after yourself. And that is what they're doing to so many groups. Transgender people. There's no such thing as transgender. You're either male or female. Those who try. So many of the other things. They're creating victims, and that's destroying our culture. And it's also based upon creating division. You're a victim, so someone has got to be a perpetrator. So they create a perpetrator and they create a victim. But the poor victim is the worst off, because they are in victimhood and they can't take responsibility. They let other people get the blame. So it's a terrible way to live, and they're destroying good people. The Australian Aboriginal, from Melbourne, there's a higher proportion of Australian Aboriginals at the top ranks of the AFL than any other race. Sorry, that out of proportion to their race. There's a higher proportion relative. What do we got? About 3 to 4% Aboriginals in the country. We've got 11% in the parliament. We've got much higher proportion in the NRL and in the AFL. They're wonderful athletes. They're wonderful business people. They're wonderful sport. They're wonderful sports. They're wonderful artists. They're wonderful scientists. Why are we labeling them as needing help? Nampa Jimpa Price and Pauline and myself have been calling this out for years now. We've got to stop putting Australian Aboriginals down and celebrate them, because they deserve so much more acclaim rather than be told that they're downtrodden. That's bullshit.
Did Jacinta pick the wrong party when she jumped out from the Nationals? She's a good there's one good Liberal. She's a magnificent woman, Jacinta.
I like Nampa Jimpa.
She's a great lady. The other part that actually, if you take that one step further, there's one other thing I'd put into that. So it's creating division. It's creating victims. It's also creating a generation, and I think it's already done this. Of young. I don't want to call it Aussie kids, because we're all Aussie. But for sake of the argument, so white Aussie kids who've got European Anglo heritage, you're creating a group there that feel ashamed. They feel shame for being, what do they call us, colonialists. Everyone who talks about colonialism, I call them founders. Those people that came halfway across the globe, knowing they could never go back, they founded this country. They weren't colonialists. They built the country up so that all Australians, whatever culture you've got, could believe in this country benefit from this country, its natural wealth, and form a new life. I mean, I work with a lot of recent immigrant families or families, that are 2, 3 generations in. Some of them are Vietnamese, Indonesians, great families. And you know what? They all want a better life for their kids. They all want to get away from oppressive governments. They all want to be in a country where you can express your opinion, have a vote, feel like you're contributing. They all want their kids to play sport. They all want their kids to have a good education. These are what are called Aussie values. But when you get this shame put across on one part of your community, which creates that division in our social cohesion, which is our white young men, and no doubt, I know you've spoken at the Australia Marches rally and a few others, there is now a section of our community, which I think you guys got to be a little bit careful of, the Groiper and NSN movement. Because and it's one thing I want to check with you on your immigration policy. They talk about deportation and remigration. I try and get some clarity on this, and I never can quite get there, except for the NSN mob. They say, if you're not white, you're going, which I don't think is obviously feasible. So it was great what you said about One Nation.
We talk about remigrating people. We talk about deporting people. There are 100,000 people here illegally on temporary visas. We want to remigrate them, deport them. They've got to go quickly. Sorry?
And on that part, we'd all agree. I said, yep, on that part, we'd all agree.
Okay. Then there's another 100,000 on students who are here under false pretenses. They're either students working and they've got no intention of studying, or they've passed and they're just hanging on. They've got to go. We've got to really look thoroughly at the international students, the foreign students. So we make no bones about that. Get rid of them. They're here illegally. That's the way. We shouldn't be tolerating them.
And if I read your immigration policy as well, you also had certain areas that you wouldn't accept immigration from. So war-torn areas, I would assume from areas...
Islamic places that are Islamic and rife with terrorism. We don't want them. We can't afford it.
Can I give you one example of one of the last, and I would normally agree, this last guest I had, though, made me think a little bit on it. He goes by Dr. Amir. He doesn't want his name to go out there. I think he's concerned about the radical Islamic content of our community. Now, he's an Assyrian Christian, right? And he was in Iraq as a teenager when the Americans went in there. And he was a big supporter of the Yanks going in there. Wasn't a fan of Saddam Hussein. It was a fascinating interview. And he had one of his best friends get beheaded by radical Islamists coming into their Christian community, taking it over and killing. And they talk about genocide and all the shit in Gaza. It's actually going on in Syria and places like Iraq, where radical Islamic communities come in and they overwhelm the indigenous Christian community there.
So they're killing Christians in Syria. They're killing Christians in Nigeria. Yeah. No one talks about it except for us.
But from those areas, would we still say to those people who are suffering that oppression, would they be denied the ability to come to Australia?
No. They would come under refugee status. I've been asking questions. I think I've had 3 different sessions, 3 lots of questions of the minister representing the immigration minister, Senator Watt, on that very topic, and saying, how come you aren't bringing Christians in as refugees? How come all the refugees, all the refugees you bring are from Islamic countries where they're being slaughtered by Islamic extremists? Why do you not bring in any Christians? It's clear.
Can I give you the answer to that?
Oh, we know the answer.
Because they won't vote for him in the long run?
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah.
There's a story. It's a true story because I read about it by the author in the Weekend Australian. The author was, what was the name of that picklebox champion?
Picklebox?
Picklebox, BP Picklebox quiz champion. Oh, I've forgotten his name. He's the president. He was an ALP, very bright guy, bright guy, and a decent sort of person. He was elected as a Labor Party MP in the lower house. Oh, what's his name? Anyway, then he became Labor Party president, and he wrote this in an article in the Weekend Australian. Bob, when he was president, he said, we went and we brought in the Vietnamese boat refugees, and we put them all in Western Sydney, thinking they'd vote Labor. And he said, the buggers, they all became small businessmen and voted Liberal. Nowadays, they'd be voting One Nation. We've got a lot of Vietnamese, Asians voting One Nation. But the point is that people wake up through the hip pocket quite often, and the Asians are very productive people, very hardworking generally, and the Vietnamese. We've had great people from Asia, we've had great people from Vietnam, we've had great people, and refugees. We've had great people from South America. We've had good people from many countries of the world. The problem with immigration becomes if you get too many of one, and you start setting up enclaves and ghettos, and then, Bob Hawke caused this damage, and Howard accelerated the damage. When we were in the 60s under Menzies and even the 70s, you had to meet very high standards to be allowed into our country. You had to be invited into our country. You had to come here and you had to work. You had to make a commitment to Australia. You had to commit to obeying the laws, fitting in with the culture, assimilating, and being a good citizen. It was a very high bar to meet. And people met them. And we had wonderful migrants from many, many different countries, many, many different races. Nowadays, they seem to prefer welfare people who depend upon the Labor handout. And this is what's destroying our country, bringing in people who, and then they get citizenship quickly, and then they get to vote for Tony Burke. That's what's wrong with this country now. And you don't let in people to become voters for Labor. You let in only people who've got skills that can be immediately productive, who will fit in. John Howard embraced multiculturalism as well. What the hell are we doing, bringing in people and saying, keep your culture, don't become Australian? We used to say, become Australian. And we used to joke about the Itais, the Wops, the Italians, the Wogs, etc. But we loved them. We joke about them, but they wanted to fit in. They wanted to become accepted in our country. That's a wonderful aspiration. Now we're doing the opposite. And both the Liberal Party and Labor Party are celebrating people who don't become Australians. And that's totally wrong.
Well, I think that Mosque visit by Albo demonstrated that. I mean, I would take it one step further. We've so far diluted access into this country that not only are we not bringing in people that want to help build this country, like the Greeks and Italians. I mean, you wouldn't meet harder workers.
And South Americans.
And the whole bunch, the Vietnamese. Unbelievable. I've got some good friends, families that come from Indonesia. Wonderful people, Catholics, just wanted to get away from that Islamic influence and get to a country that was a Christian country. They thought that terrifies them. Two things that terrify these people, which I think is fertile ground for you guys. If the Liberals had any brains, which they don't, it would be fertile ground for them. They're terrified of two things: the radical Islamic growth in the country and crime on the streets. They said, I had a Chinese family. I go, what do you think of Australia? And their first comment, too much crime. He goes, under the communists, we never had this crime. It's crazy. He goes, we love everything about Australia, but the crime is killing us. So this is you get the beautiful thing with me coaching basketball. I've got this whole, it's really what I call my little Australia. I've got 2 Aussie kids in there. I had 2 Indonesian kids. I've got a Chinese boy. I've got a Sudanese boy. His dad's a lovely guy. He's a funny man. He's a pastor. He's a Christian pastor. And he goes over to the Middle East and Nigeria to try and convert people to Christianity. His last trip was a day before Trump took on Iran. He was stuck over there, and he finally got back. He was quite relieved about that. But they're just wonderful people. They've got all the same, and this is what concerns me, like I touched on it with the Griper and NSN movements. I've talked to a few. I'm trying to reach out to a few of the young guys in there and find out why they've got these attitudes. Because I look at these kids and all I see is Aussie kids. They talk the same way. They love the same sports. Yeah. They love the same things. And if we ever get to be a country that says to those families, those kids, you're not welcome anymore, piss off, then I think the pendulum swings too far. So I'm happy to hear what you said. Having said that, I think our immigration now, because of the political game, not about what's in our national interest, We are not only welcoming people that don't like this country, I actually think we're welcoming a fifth column.
Correct.
If the thing goes to
Correct.
shit, we've got a large enough demographic here now that could cause enormous damage. And who's to know whether there's not enclaves? You can't tell me that after Bondi that's not a factor. And yet in the commission, it's not in the Royal Commission, it's not even mentioned.
No,
where is radical
that's
Islam mentioned?
That's a setup. You know, it really boils down to immigration. Boils down to 5 words: numbers. We are letting in far too many. They're swamping our housing. They're swamping our infrastructure. They're causing inflation because of the demand that they're driving. Secondly, the quality. Will they fit in? Are they productive? Are they compatible with us? Have they got the skills? Thirdly, is the culture. Will they contribute to productivity? Will they be a risk? Will they adopt and respect our values, laws, and customs? 4th word is assimilate. I'll come back to this word in a minute. The 5th word, I've only become aware of this fairly recently. I've always thought this is about culture, but it's not. There's something special about this: identity. Arguably, that's the most important. So, you know, when you go overseas, Bob, I introduce myself as I'm Malcolm Roberts. So they've got my family name, Roberts, and I'm Australian. That's it. Family, nation. Family, nation. Be very, very patriotic. Everyone does them. Bob Hawke. Yep. Bob Hawke.
Yeah.
Bob Hawke championed multiculturalism, and during his reign, the common saying from people who didn't understand, they said the Americans are multicultural. Bullshit. The Americans are not multicultural. They say you can be proud of being Vietnamese, you can be proud of being Korean, you can be proud of being Japanese, you can be proud of being Polish, you can be proud of being Russian, but above all, I am American. And what they want us to say here is, I'm proud of being Polish, I'm proud of being Asian. No mention of Australia. That is the short route to destruction. There are 2 basic forms, 2 basic structures on which human civilizations are built: the family, which they're destroying, and the nation state, which they're destroying deliberately. One world, global governance, control over people. When people don't have family and they're in strife, where do they turn? Government. They become dependent. It's deliberate. Multiculturalism is a deliberate ploy to destroy this country, destroy the Australian identity. And that's at the core of every patriotic Australian.
I'll give you an example. I talk to 2 examples. One, could you ever imagine Donald Trump standing in front of 3 flags? So what you're saying there's spot on. And number 2, one of those kids I coach, I used to pick. So he's an old Aussie Burma guy, and I'm picking up. I used to go to. The parents couldn't get him to training because it was too early. They had work. So I said, listen, they all 3 of them go to school. I'll pick them up as their coach. I'll take them to training. You can pick them up from training. So they're 3 Asian boys. 2 are Chinese. 1 is Vietnamese. Beautiful kids. And it's fascinating. There's another school I used to pick up. 2 is this was an interest. It's great being a basketball coach. So I used to pick up 2 Islamic kids and a Jewish kid. So they would come to the car with me to games and training, and we'd talk about all sorts of things. The one common thing with the 2 schools, I said, what are you studying at school? And inevitably, history would come up. So I always ask, what are they teaching about history? Indigenous affairs and all this. I said, okay, do you know about the Anzacs? And they go, no, not really. Anzac Day? I said, no, the Anzacs, the what Anzac Day is all about. They have no idea. I said, what country does the Gallipoli Peninsula reside in? They have no idea what the Gallipoli Peninsula is.
Yeah.
They don't even know we fought the Turks. They don't even know in World War II that we fought the Japanese. They all think it was Hitler because that's what they see on the media. It doesn't get taught in our schools.
But isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful, Bob? Sorry to cut you off, but
yeah,
I can't resist this point. We have a suburb near us called Belbarry. It's somewhat a bedroom suburb, but it's got a war memorial. And Anzac Day, there's no car park there. So people park on the streets, and in the dark, you can hear the clip clop of feet coming towards the Anzac Memorial. and you can just see kids. When I was growing up, we didn't go to Anzac Day very much. No, there wasn't. But despite the government, people on Anzac Day, fantastic, and it's the young kids that are being introduced to Anzac Day. It's wonderful. It's like the rebirth of the country. So that's despite the government. It's going against the government because people are proud of what the Anzacs did, and they're proud of what our country stands for.
Well,
And
I think
that's
from my
every year
conversation,
I get goosebumps.
well, I think there's something even bigger to that, because they're not getting the counters that, for example, they have with people who've been raised in Australia, like me, a boomer who's lived nowhere else but Australia, was raised by parents that lived through the Great Depression, World War II, and also my grandparents who lived through World War One, and uncles and whatever who went and fought in that war. So, they come across me and they get tidbits of what Australia was all about. Yeah. So I told these Islamic boys about how my grandparents came from Wessex in England. They went to New Zealand and they decided Australia was better. And they landed in South Melbourne the week before Australia became a federation in 1901 at the Melbourne. What's the Melbourne? It's not the museum. The Melbourne. What's that big Melbourne building? It used to be the Federation building. Come on, Malcolm, help me out. Exhibition buildings.
Oh, yeah.
So in the cities, that's where Australia was founded, right there. So they didn't have any idea about this. And the people are coming to things like Anzac Day, the recent immigrants and the younger ones, because they've got a thirst for knowledge about who the people who built this country. They don't get it from the school. They don't get it from their politicians. They get it from other places. And by going to Anzac Day, they can connect with that. And if our politicians, our governments would actually, in the nation's interest, say, hey, listen, we're not a bunch of colonialists. Like I said before, these are founders. I have leftists. And the biggest, I'll tell you the other biggest problems outside the fifth column I'm talking about. There's another sort of fifth column. And that is the indoctrinated white Australians who want to tear down everything this country is. I got in an argument with them. He called my parents colonialists because they were before 1950. I said, if it wasn't for my parents' generation, we'd be speaking Japanese. I said, they're not colonialists. They survived the Great Depression. What people don't understand, lamb stew is an Australian cuisine because in the 1930s, the 20s and 30s, they can't believe it, this story. I get told it by my parents. Dad used to go out shooting rabbits and have rabbit stew. Why did he shoot rabbits? Because during the Great Depression, there was no dole. If you didn't shoot rabbits, you starved. And then Dad at 18 joined the RAF and ended up fighting in World War II. He had, on Dad's side, there was 11 kids. On Mum's side, there was 9. Dad was the oldest kid, but they lost both parents for different reasons. So back in those days, all his brothers and sisters went to orphanages. So Dad went off to fight. This is the people they call colonialists. Dad went off to fight World War II. He came back and he visited Mum. They weren't married at this stage. And they would go and get all his brothers and sisters out of the orphanage and take them to the footy, the zoo or whatever. So Dad, we always used to wonder why he's so grumpy a lot of the time. The reason he was grumpy, we didn't find out this until their 50th wedding anniversary. And Dad's brothers came and had a crack at us. And they said, your dad was grumpy because he raised 2 families, one of 11, and then Dad and Mum stupidly had 10 kids. So that was the generation, and they're getting called colonialists. Yeah, I lost my shit with this leftist. I said, you don't have no idea what those people built. And we need to educate our young ones about what that is. And Dad would be horrified, for example, at the growth of the NSN in this country. He used to talk to us all the time about what they fought against in World War II. He hated the Japanese with a passion. He had mates who were part of those poor bastards that we used for bayonet practice and stuff like that. So every Australian soldier hated the Japanese. He took that to his grave. But that was because, like with Ben Roberts-Smith, we sent them into horrific conditions to defend this country. Yeah. They fought for this country. They bled for the country. And then they came back. What did they do? No psychologist to help them with, any depression or whatever. Straight in, got married, had kids, raised a family, got a house, built a business, gave us all an education, and now all their kids have done exactly the same thing. They're builders. They're not colonialists. That stuff really annoys me. It's that stuff we've got to connect with the next generation, whether they're immigrant families, whether they're Australian families.
Yeah, I just want to say 2 things. That was really well said, mate. Thank you for sharing that. And the other thing is that we've got to look at how we're indoctrinating kids, how they're indoctrinating kids. Because John Howard did another thing. He brought in, as Prime Minister, he brought in the national curriculum. If you've got a curriculum in each state, our country is set up as a federation of sovereign independent states. It's sovereign entities: Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tassie, etc. There's very good reason for that. We pinched the idea, our founding fathers pinched the idea from the Yanks, competitive federalism. When the Yanks set up their constitution, they looked at Europe and said, we don't want that. Privately owned central bank and large central government. So they set up sovereign entities in each of the states and have very limited powers in the federal government. You've got to have a small central government for trade, for foreign affairs, for defense, maybe communications, border control, etc. So you've got to have a small central government. But most of the power should be in the states, because then if Queensland stuffs something up, Victoria does something well, Queensland has moved to Victoria and Victoria benefits. So you've got to, that's a competition in governance. That's wonderful. You get real accountability. Well, if you've got everything being done by a massive central government, there's no accountability, because you end up with Liberal and Labor. And this Liberal and Labor being a uni party, in America, it's the Democrats and the Republicans. There are some independents amongst both of them that stand up. So America's not quite as bad, but it is basically a uni party. Canada, they're a uni party. In Britain, it's Labor Party and the Tories, or the Conservatives. They're a uni party. In New Zealand, it's Nationals and Labor. They're a uni party. And look at the colours they all have. They all are either red on the left, except for America, which is red Republican, and blue on the right, except for America, which is blue Democrats. So you've got this red, blue, purple uni party in every major democracy on the planet, and then the people are all fooled that it's real opposition, contrast, bullshit. But it brings me to something, Bob. That is a need for a democracy to be active democracy. If a democracy is not active, it's passive. It slides quickly into apathy, slides quickly into tyranny, slides quickly into control. And that's what we've got going on. We're on that slide in this country. By active, I don't just mean that people vote. What I mean is that they look at the candidates, assess the policies, and then vote for a candidate on the merits, not on the party. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they help out at the polling booths, hand of vote cards, whatever. I celebrate Labor people handing out how to vote cards, because they're involved in democracy. They're taking an active part in democracy. And then the other part is holding members of Parliament accountable between elections, really sticking it to us, making sure that we are listening, making sure that we're understanding what the people need. Instead, we got governments that try to look good, not do good. So active democracy, you're an active participant in democracy because you're encouraging debate. So, our country, there's a cycle in history. It goes from active democracy to passive to apathy to control. We're in control now. Look at the under control now, because you look at COVID, the way Morrison and the Labor premiers manage that. You look at the free speech laws, etc., that they're doing that, and sometimes they do it with bullshit, not directly with laws, but they put heinous restrictions. Some of the restrictions we have going on in this country, Bob, are worse than those in Romania under Ceausescu.
No,
some of the restrictions, and then you slip into tyranny, you slip into anarchy. Then the dictator comes in. Then it gives way again to active democracy, and away we go again. We've got to stop that mess and just get on with being active, get back into being active democracy. And that's why I appreciate what you're doing as a
thank you,
as a people, independent people news.
That's what we're doing. We actually, it's interesting you come to that. I think the problem, there's two things, and one you mentioned before, where you said one nation could be the last hope. And I actually agree with that, because I think you get to apathy, and once you get to apathy, it slides very quickly downhill. And that's what's worrying me about young men going towards these more volatile groups. And you get to apathy because people lose faith. They lose trust in the political system.
Good point.
I think we're there. What's the point? They're all the same. And that's where you guys, I think, are our lowest hope. And that's a pretty heavy burden. And I've watched a few interviews with Pauline, and you can see she senses that burden. I think you see when they talk about the poll, she's sort of saying, I'm taken aback by the polls. I've seen it say it a couple of times now. I feel the responsibility of these polls, but it's a burden we really need you guys to embrace, because if you guys fall over like Liberal and Labor don't, I don't see a future for this country. I don't know whether you guys coined the phrase, but I think it's a grassroots phrase. Maybe you guys did. What was it? One nation to save the nation. I reckon it's a brilliant saying. That's got
another one that someone gave me. Someone commenting on social media: one nation or no nation.
Yes.
Without one nation, you're no nation.
Yeah, great saying. But there's two things there's one policy which we just touched on. I'd love to see you develop a policy platform and that is how we can make young men in particular. Now, I love the girls and all that, but the DEI, I think, has just swung too far. I think I've had 5 good friends who've committed suicide. I coach a lot of teenage boys. You see they turn to drugs and all sorts of other things because they're kept being told they're not good enough. You're a white male. You wouldn't know. You can't comment on a female issues like abortion, for example. You can't comment on our history because you're white. You're too privileged. Every day, that time they go to the footy, there's a welcome to country thing promoting Indigenous values instead of promoting everybody. I think there's got to be something as a country we do to help young men so we don't get into this ridiculous shit with Ben Roberts-Smith. I mean, he should be a person that should be held up to our young men as an example of what it means to be a patriot for this country. Instead, we're tearing him and Heston Russell down. There should be a policy, I think, that can directly addresses young men, their mental health, and more importantly, how they can feel proud about who they are, their heritage and their history. And they shouldn't be ashamed of it, and they shouldn't be made to feel ashamed of it. So that's one thing. Another part, I put this by Scott the other day, and I think even Jordan, I actually see, this is where I see 2 things on it. So hopefully you can hear me out and then give me your opinion on it. I see the problems in our country as very endemic. Even if you guys won government, would you have the ability to pass legislation with a volatile Senate, for example? I mean, we've got to get a government that can take some action. In our bureaucracies, we have issues. We have these mammoth bureaucracies that are causing huge debt. What you touched on then with active democracy, I would love a debate, a roundtable debate on the strengths and weaknesses of a preferential voting system versus a first past the post voting system, or any voting system that gets us better representation. What you said about Albo winning a majority with only 36% of the vote, in my opinion, that's a nonsense. That's not representing what the country as a whole wants. So how do we get from there? Now, I've got no doubt, for example, if Albo wins the next election, the next big picture item for him is going to be a republic. He's going to push for a republic. I've put on my little policy platform on us, I actually think a Conservative Party with the courage to propose a republic with conservative values could actually not only win that debate, but win a few elections on the back of it. Because basically it gives you the power then to bring down the system and put something better in place that would replace that system, that can get rid of all these issues that you're talking about. So, for example, on hate speech laws, why did we not have a First Amendment like the Yanks, where we embrace liberty, the values of free speech, opinion, assembly? You can say what you like to be able to do. Things like that. It could be the Second Amendment with the people, like we had with Bondi. Who did they come after? Perfectly law-abiding gun owners who did nothing wrong, but they came after them. So if we could put things in like that could give us a better representation, like what you just said just then, a small central government, but put more power to the states. Could we make that constitution that has served us well for 126 years better? And is really the monarchy in England with King Charles what we want to base our future democracy on? Or are we strong enough to stand on our 2 feet? And that's not a conservative argument. The reason I say conservatives should think about it is if we don't grab that argument and run with it, the ALP will. What republic do we want? One modelled by the leftists in the ALP and the socialists and the UN and all the Agenda 21 people? Or do we want a real democracy that strengthens liberties, freedoms, democracy, our vote, and makes Australia finally stand on its own 2 feet? And we can actually recognise all Australians, and we don't have to have this nonsense of 3 flags or whatever. It embraces every single Australian, not whether you're Indigenous, not whether you're an immigrant, but just because you love this country. And then what you're talking about, like with the Yanks, we can put our hand on our heart and swear an oath to our country and stand under one flag with a lot of pride. I actually think the first conservative movement that would do that would get huge support. But that's just me. So far, everyone I've pitched that to has said no. But I just think it's inevitable. So and could you imagine if One Nation came up with this and put it out there and they got their claws into it before the ALP do, mate, you would have leftists' heads spinning. This is their pet project. This is the one they want. Beat them to the punch. Put a conservative republic up and say, this is why we want to do it, and keep the best of what we've got, but get rid of the worst and make it better. Streamline it. You come from a business background. How many times does a company realign its constitution to meet modern conditions? We haven't really had a big change in our constitution for years. I think by grabbing a republic and running for it, you would take away a big thing, a big policy platform that Labor, I've got no doubt they've got it in the back of their mind. It's just a matter of when, not if. And their timing is going to, they're already talking about creating a bigger parliament with more bloody politicians, which we don't need. So I think that's something I would love to see one political party on the centre right start to run with, because I don't think many Australians give 2 hoots about a monarch, King Charles in England, who seems more consumed about Islam than he does with his own Anglican church, which he's the head of. So, yeah, I think that's something someone should look at. I'd love One Nation to run with it.
Okay, you've raised many things there. First one you touched on, wasn't the first you raised, but the first one I want to touch on and put it to bed straight away is Labor Party proposed an increase in the number of central or federal MPs. Completely wrong. We don't need it at all. We need to do the reverse. Decentralize, get rid of the central, shrink the central government to make it fit the Constitution, and then put most of that back to the states where it belongs. Education, health, Aboriginal affairs, energy, back to the states, and may the best win. May the best state win in each category, especially in education. Second, the first point you raised was about males need to be proud. I think you're absolutely correct. We need to get back to males just being treated as males. I would get rid of some people are saying, Malcolm, why don't you support a men's department for men? My ideal would be no women's department, no men's department, just an Australian. We're looked after just with our shrink the cabinet, shrink the ministry down to much smaller number. Get rid of most of the responsibilities of the federal government that have been stolen from the states. Get them back to the states. Get rid of most of and I mean most of the ministers, but no ministry for male. And then just start treating males the way we treat females, just with respect and love and care, and get rid of the national curriculum. That's where a lot of this bullshit's coming from. Get rid of that. Just let males be males again. Voting, I'm strongly in favor of preferential voting because it gives the opportunity for you to, if your number 1 doesn't get in, your vote goes to number 2. If your number 2 doesn't get in, it goes to number 3. And it means your vote will never end up with the last of your choices. So I always put the Greens last. And I generally put the Liberals before Labor, depends upon the candidate. But what I'm getting to is the preferential voting is spot on, except that Howard changed it from effectively an optional preferential voting to a compulsory preferential voting where you must number every box. I would change it so that you don't have to number every box. So if you wanted to vote 1 and that's all you do. If you want to vote 1, 2, 3, 4 and not 5, 6, 7, 8, that's all you do. So I would change that preferential. I think that's the best way. The Senate, I would keep the Senate because the Senate is a proportional representation, and that way you've got to have a House. I think the American system of a Senate and a House of Representatives is the best, because what you've got is you've got to have a representative to look after your community, your district, your federal electorate. So that needs to be in small batches, 120,000 people. That's fine. But then you need the counter to that, because one nation might get 25% of the vote in every electorate but not get a seat. Labor Party might get 33% in every electorate and get almost every seat. So that's wrong. So if you have a proportional representation in the Senate, it means one nation gets 25% of the senators, Labor Party gets 33% of the senators. And so it needs to run properly. What I would try to do, I don't know how to do this, but I've mentioned it to a couple of people in the Senate. The Senate is a state's house. It's a house of review. It's the emergency brake on the country. Now that's fallen aside because of the party system. We need to get back to sitting as states. So I'd have all the senators from WA sit in one group, senators from New South Wales another group, etc., like that. So sit as states, but it needs to reflect the society. I'm totally opposed to a republic. I grew up, my dad was Welsh, he's British, he was British. Mum was a very strong conservative. They loved the royal family. And I said, it's rubbish. You can't have a royal family where some clown gets to be the king of Australia. Then I grew up, I listened to Harry Gibbs and the High Court judges when Turnbull had his referendum, and I realised, I woke up, I really thought I realised what a big mistake I almost made. I voted against the Republic. I voted for keeping that as it is. With the Republic, it's just a race for some clapped out old politician or corrupt politician to buy his way into becoming president. With the British system that we've got, it's actually an Australian system. We have got a Governor General who is now Australian, who's appointed essentially by the Prime Minister after supposedly listening to the other parties. So you've got someone who's almost neutral. He or she reports back to the king or queen, in the monarch in England, but they're responsible to the Australian people. Now, what we've got is we don't have a monarchy. It's very, very important to understand. We do not have a monarchy. I was wrong. We have a constitutional monarchy. The top entity in our country is not the Governor General. It's not King Charles. The top entity in our country under our constitution is the Constitution itself. The Governor General has reserved powers limited by the Constitution. The monarchs, Queen Elizabeth was marvelous, and I don't think Prince Charles will deviate. She served the country because she had to respect the Constitution. Her role is defined by the Constitution. And that's what's so wonderful. So Australians, the top entity in Australia is the Constitution, but that means it's the people. And so the people are the sovereigns of this country. I'm not talking about sovereign citizens. I'm talking about the top of Australia is the people. What's happened in this country is the people have fallen asleep and become apathetic and passive, and they're no longer being the boss. Now we've got Labor and Liberal prime ministers pretending that the people serve them. That's bullshit. We've got to get back to the government serving the people, the politicians serving the people, the bureaucrats serving the people. When I gave my first speech, and for many speeches after that until people woke up, I started with the words, as a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia. When I first said those words, Bob, in my first speech, Labor Party sneered, Greens laughed, the Liberals, I don't know what they did, but it was pretty quiet. but I mean, they sneered at me for doing that. They thought it was stupid. But that's because the people have slipped into passivity and they're not active. What we've got to do is show that, I've been at so many state and federal elections, and someone comes up and says, oh, bugger me, we've got to vote again. And I'm thinking, 10 minutes, big deal. And then on Monday, and then they go into the voting booth, the ballot box, and they draw dicks and balls on it. And that's it.
Okay.
And then on Monday they say, oh, bloody hell, we got Labor back. Then they complain about the tax. They have the power of the ballot box. That's the most important power on earth when you aggregate it. the thing that I would do is to educate more people in the voting, get it back to the state, encourage the states to have curriculum that teaches about voting, teaches about the political system, teaches about history so we don't keep repeating it, and teaches about the things of value in this country. I'd get back into being active and freedom loving. That's one thing I would say. The Constitution, we need to get the Constitution back to, we need to get back to complying with the Constitution. With so many places where it's not compliant right now. So the first thing is get compliance with the Constitution. Then the second thing is to change the Constitution to put in what you said, the freedom of speech. That's initiated by Pauline and myself in the Senate. It was defeated by the other parties, but freedom of speech and some of the other basic freedoms. And the biggest, most damaging system of all, and systems drive behavior, is the tax system. It is destroying our country.
Yes.
We have got proposals for tax reform. We're developing even more of them. But these single, let me. I think I better start heading home.
Yeah, mate.
But,
yeah, sure.
But let me share a story with you with Bob Carter. Do you know Bob Carter? Know of him? He died in
the former New South Wales Premier.
No, Bob Carter was
Carter. I thought you said Carr. Sorry.
No, climate skeptic. He ran around the country at his own cost. He was a wonderful scientist debunking the climate fraud, and he and I were doing it as volunteers. We'd occasionally bump into each other, speaking at the same event. And one me, Malcolm, this climate fraud might be the biggest scam ever. And I said, Bob, it's not even close. He said, what? And Bob is a pretty bright guy. And I said, look at the money scam, where they're printing money out of thin air, fiat currency. He said, yeah, you're right. That's far bigger. And I said, but it's not the biggest, Bob. He said, what's the biggest? He said, the anti-human scam. That's where they preach that humans are greedy, irresponsible, uncaring, unkind, just don't care. And Bob, I know that humans care. And in front of an audience of thousands of people, I can just say to them, I know that you care, because every one of you is here because you care. And I know that someone has cared for each one of you, otherwise you wouldn't be alive. When a horse is born, it pops out of its mare, the mother, it plops on the ground, and it gets to its spindly little legs, shaky legs, and it finally gets up, and after about half an hour, it's trotting. This horse is trotting. And then it sidles up to its mum and starts suckling, and for 3 months it suckles, then it starts eating grass and just moves with the herd. That's it. From there on, it's just getting bigger. You and I popped out of our mum about so long, completely dependent. And if your mother didn't look after you, somebody did. And what's the proof? The fact is, you're looking at me. You're alive. That means someone cared for you. And humans, the better the care, the more their offspring survive. And we are programmed to look after our offspring. And we are programmed to care. So what I'm saying, Bob, is that the United Nations is destroying science because of the climate fraud to control people. It's all about Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development Goals. It's about control. It's also about wealth transfer. The major banks, the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank in America, our RBA is not privately owned, but the American is. It dictates the money currency for around the world, basically with the petrodollar. But then the third thing is the United Nations is riddled with and Al Gore with the United Nations Secretary General. You need to be controlled. You speak misinformation and disinformation, we want to censor you. That is something I am fighting in the Senate now. I just been through an inquiry leading the opposition to that. But they keep saying that we're evil, greedy, rapacious, uncaring, unkind. We're not. We are wonderful people. We are the most intelligent and best species on the planet. We're the most deserving species on the planet. We've got a couple of dickheads among us who, well, that's what happens when the ego. But my point is that most humans are wonderful, Bob. So we should be celebrating humans, and we should be telling our sons, our males, and our daughters how wonderful humans are, and give them something to live up to. What's that Pygmalion effect? You live up to or down to your expectations. If you're told that you're greedy, irresponsible, uncaring, unkind, you will be that way.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest challenge we face. And the best thing to to tell our men and our young boys is be proud of being human.
Well, a controversial thing. What you've said there is absolutely spot on. And what you were talking about, even though we both disagree on it, a lot of this transgender stuff, this is where it's coming from. Young men have been felt ashamed of being who they are. So they're naturally looking, they haven't got the emotional support around them. They're looking for something better and they head down this path. And what's worse in Victoria is they're encouraged down this path and parents can't get involved. If they get involved, they could risk going to prison.
Well,
That's
Bob,
what we've got. It's
yeah,
crazy.
I got to jump in there. It's about money.
Yes.
Big Pharma is taking drugs and selling them at a high cost, at high prices to young kids, and these kids are groomed on social media by a careful grooming outfit. They're groomed by lobbyists. Equality Australia is one of them. Now got tax status after twice the full bench of the federal court ruled that they weren't ineligible. They were ineligible for tax. What is it now? Deductible gift registry. The Labor government just legislated.
Yeah.
I spoke against it, but that's what I'm saying. What we need to do is get back to the basics and prioritize our children. That they're the most important thing. Again, I'm against abortion because that's killing. I could go into that for great length.
Here another 2 hours, mate. I'm with you 100% on that.
But we have got to protect life. If you don't protect life, Bob, you know this as a Christian. If you don't protect life, you have nothing.
Well, the most disgraceful vote that ever can. And look, I can have my issues, for example, with Senator Babette, some of the things he does on social media, but he introduced, I think it was him anyway, that bill to protect children who survived abortions, and yet
babies born alive.
Yes, and we voted it down. I mean, what does that say about us as a nation? I mean,
Labor Party, Greens, and many of the Liberals.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about most humans are noble and all that. Then my most obvious question is, how can we get some of the worst of them into our parliament that would actually vote down that sort of legislation?
Because the people don't care much at elections, and they think they're frustrated. They've lost hope. They think it doesn't matter. But if they realize it really does matter, come the day after the election, the things start changing. We can get our country back. People, you said it earlier on. People have become apathetic because they don't think they can influence. They can influence. They've got to realize that.
Yeah, but that and I know you're stressed for time. I'll tell you what killed a lot of and encouraged a lot of that apathy was COVID. People just thought, well, we've got no control over this. They're putting these things on top of us. We didn't vote for this. Yet they keep, and a lot of the apathy that I hear is, it doesn't matter how you vote. They're just going to keep bringing it into us, and that stains every politician. Unfortunately, it would even stain you guys a little bit as well. And that's a lot of the argument I have for embracing, and we probably won't get to agree on this one. That's fine. That's a democracy. That's why I'm saying, if you embrace a republic, it will actually get people more active into their politics because they're going to help build it. It's something they have ownership of it. You can still make that republic very similar to what we've got now. But it's a way, I see, it is a tool to get rid of the apathy and get more people engaged. I think it would be worth looking at. I know I'm fighting a lone battle here, but I think you can get the best of both worlds. And I would agree with you about the monarchy. I voted against the Republic with Turnbull. One, I'd never trusted Turnbull. Number two, I don't trust the philosophy that people can't vote for their president. If you're going to have a republic, the people must pick their president, not politicians in Canberra. The governors we get, and one of the reasons we lost trust through COVID is because the Governor General and the governors were seen as paper tigers. You know, a lot of people were saying, well, where's the governor? Why doesn't the government act to protect us? Isn't that what the Constitution's about? And the governors sat on their hands. The Governor General sat on their hands. They just supported the government.
But I actually like that because I don't like them sitting on their hands. They have got some power.
Yeah.
But they don't have a lot of power. Their powers are in reserve just in case something happens. But the real power in this country is the people. See, I just mentioned that a little while ago. You might disagree with me, but I think you agree with me. But
I agree with that. Yeah.
Until more people wake up to that, and we stop saying the Governor General has the power, the Prime Minister has the power. I disagree. The people have the power, and the people have got to stand up. I'm not talking about getting guns. I'm not talking about hanging politicians. Well, I'd like to hang some, but I'm talking about
that, Malcolm. They've got the power of the vote.
I'd like to hang them by a piece of anatomy, not their head.
Yeah.
But no, well, being serious though. Until the people wake up, our country won't turn around.
Well, I'll go back just quickly, and it's probably a good note to finish off with what we started on. People are apathetic about their vote in this country, but 2 months ago, 40,000 Iranians gave their lives to get that vote.
Great point.
So maybe Australians have got to realise that there's people dying on this planet to have what we've got, and maybe I do agree we've got to get people more engaged with their votes to become. If you want change, you can get change, but you've got to embrace the people that will bring about that change. And I hope, honestly, that can be you guys and Pauline. I got two questions for you though to finish off with. Is that all right? You got time? Yep. And this is just a bit of fun. I always like finish off in these interviews and fun. The person you would least like to go out to dinner with in the federal parliament would be?
Larissa Waters.
Oh, really? Okay, I was expecting a Lydia Thorpe or a Marine. What's her name? Marine Farquhar.
No, I actually don't.
I don't know how you speak next to those. But...
Lydia does some things that are over the top, and quite frankly, she embarrasses herself. But I think she's genuine. She loses control at times. She's highly emotional. She's got a good brain. She's when it's not hijacked. I actually don't mind her, but she does some stupid things. I'll grant you that. But no, Larissa Waters, because she's got a beautiful face, beautiful smile, but she's got a black heart, and she's inhuman. She's anti-human, and she really is. No.
Okay.
That's my view.
On the flip side, outside of One Nation, who's the politician you would like to go to dinner with?
Alex Antic.
Okay, that's in it. Yeah. So Alex. Okay, that leads me to a very interesting question. I like Alex. The one thing Alex gives me pause on is he's also very good mates with Jared Rennick, who hates One Nation.
I used to think very highly of Jared until he told a massive lie during the hate crimes bill. And I pointed out to him, he acknowledged, and he didn't do anything about it. He left it up there. And what he's doing to Pauline now is just disgusting.
Yeah, so I don't get
politics seems to be, in business you've got profit and loss, and you can tell lies, you can cover things up, you can play games, but eventually the market finds out because your products get shoddy, and then you get found out and you go out of business. But in politics, Jared is now behaving the way he accused the Liberals of behaving. He was right with the Liberals. Yeah.
And I was I would have Jared on this show. I've invited Jared a few times to come in. When he got banned from that event in Brisbane where you spoke at, I invited him to come on the show because I just don't agree with people getting cancelled like that. But whether you agree with them or not, the whole point is to have.
Which event was that?
You had the Scott Challenge event. Scott ended up letting him speak. But this is when they were under the March for Australia banner. And because he said something like you guys did about allowing immigration, so the March for Australia really has a lot of NSN types. They want a full ban on immigration.
No. I disagree with that. Okay. Scott, one of his strengths is that.
No, this is not Scott. Sorry, Scott broke away. Scott's a good guy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He broke away from that nonsense.
That's right. And this is what led, I think, a bit to break on. Because I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn, she may not, but I think Beck Freedom, the girl on social media, is organised, and that told them that Jared couldn't speak because he was pro-immigration. And Scott, that's when he broke away and said he actually got Jared to come up and speak, and they had a split. So I tried to get Jared to come on and allow him to have his opinion and have his speech. But then in the very next breath, he's attacking you guys and especially Pauline. And I think that's a bit of green-eyed envy. I think, you guys are rising the polls. His party's not. So I don't know. I'd like to get him.
That's what the Liberal Party and the Nationals fell into when we first started rising in the polls. They wanted to attack us. You don't usurp someone in politics by attacking them.
You work with them.
Well, you outdo them. You become better.
Or you work with them. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
A lot of the values.
I'm not going to work with the Labor Party. I work with Labor Party as a senator, but I'm not going to cozy up to the Labor Party. But...
No, well, there's a lot of people in the Liberal Party you couldn't work with, especially the moderates. But I mean, if you're being a little fair, and I hear what you're saying about the Uniparty, I do feel sorry for the likes of Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan, because they're in a situation no one's ever seen before, which you guys have created. And they don't know which way to turn at the moment. They're like rabbits in the headlight.
We didn't create it.
I know. They did.
The people created it, and the people created it because the Liberals and the Nationals and the Greens and the Teals and Labor are not doing the right thing by the country. Yeah. You know, Pauline Hanson, she's highly intelligent. She's very, very savvy. She's got good instinct, very, very good political nous. She has no fancy political strategy, no great philosophy taken off the bloody wankers at the university. Her philosophy is really simple. Does it help Australia? Is it in the national interest? Yes, do it. Is it against Australia, or does it hurt Australia or go against the national interest? Yes, don't do it. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and she's in my first 14 months in it. She came off or saying something and 4 times. Twice because she said, Malcolm, I really like what you did last week or yesterday, whatever it was. Keep going. And walked out. And then twice she came in and said, Malcolm, you're heading down this path. There are a lot of bloody alligators, mate. And I just want you to know, if you want to keep going, you keep going. But watch out for the alligators. If you don't want to keep going, that's fine by me. You know, so, and one day I went into her office. I asked a couple of questions and buggered off. And James Ashby pulled me aside later and said, you know what, Pauline, after you left the office, Pauline came over and said, I like that little bugger. He came in here, asked 2 questions and pissed off. And didn't stop to socialize and you know, carry on, have a chat. He didn't waste my time. And that's what I think we've got to get back to, just being fair dinkum.
Okay, well, great segue into my very last question for you. Pauline's now 71. Life catches up on us all. Is there a succession plan for someone else in 4 or 5 years' time whenever Pauline wants to step aside? I know she says you won't, but when you get to 71, I'm 62. There's times I'm thinking about stepping aside. So it would be smart to have a succession plan, and having Barnaby there is great. Do you guys have any sort of thinking on that way for long term? Because ultimately, and the reason I ask this, when you are in a position to challenge for government, I hope it's the next federal election. But that's real high up. Realistically, it's probably election after that. By that time, Pauline's going to be 77. So is there a succession plan for when you could grab government on who could be looking to lead the party or the movement, however you want to describe it?
One of the things is that I have enormous faith in humans. I'm aware of some of their limitations. Thomas Jefferson said, humans are wonderful, but sometimes you've got to put in protections because they're not. Just a few of them. But what I'm saying is I have enormous faith in people. There will be someone who steps up. I don't know. I'm not aware of any plans, but look, Barnaby is really doing a great job. He's a very competent person. He was the Nationals' huge loss. They abused it and they lost him. Barnaby's capable of leading. James Ashby is capable of leading, but probably some what would you say?
Young buck?
No, he's matured. He used to be very, very. He's still very creative. He is gifted. That guy is gifted. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Then there's also Lee Hansen. She's very capable.
She's amazing. Lovely.
But there are good people. Stuart Bonds, Hunter Valley. He's very, very capable. He listens to people. He's not afraid of making decisions. There are lots of, but the real issue is not who's going to replace Pauline. The real issue is how will the people who follow Pauline or come after her
Evolve.
work together? Because I don't like there's no prime minister's position stated in the Constitution. None.
No.
We have been changed because of Whitlam, and then because of Howard, and then because of Hawke, to a presidential style election campaign. It's all about electing Abbott. It's all about electing Turnbull. It's all about electing Rudd. It's all about and look at the duds amongst that lot. Abbott wasn't a dud, but what I'm getting to is that you cannot have one man as the boss or one woman as the boss who does everything. Pauline doesn't do everything. What she does is she sets the tone and then expects people to step up. And if they don't, she counsels them. And if they do, she congratulates them. But this bullshit about having one person and everything resting off that, I could go on for a while there, but it's about how the team will work together and produce a team result. That's what's the benefit of Australia. And the more we can get 28 million people involved in that, the better off we will be. We have 28 million people. We should have less government, not the person running the government. Less government and more people being involved and letting, we have got 28 million hearts and minds that are capable of doing amazing things together. That's what we've got to get to.
And that would be, I think, a great point to finish off with you. Mate, I do have one other question, but I would rather do that not offline, if you think. So what would be the best way would be to go through, what's her name? Sheena? Is it Sheena? Sharon? Oh, I've had a blank. Who's your office lady? Sorry.
Sheena.
Sheena. I got it right. So would the best way to be able to put that through to Sheena, or would you have time for me to ask that once we went off?
What's that, mate?
I've got a question. I don't want to ask.
I missed you when the
Yep. I've got a question for you. I don't want to ask you online. I'd rather ask you offline. I'm just wondering what's the right channels to put it through. Is it through Sheena or?
Yeah, or telephone.
Telephone. Okay.
Call Sheena and ask her to ask her to put you through.
Okay. All right. We'll do it that way, mate. I'll let you go. No doubt you've got to get back to that wife of yours or whatever you got left off. Mate, just thank you for your time. I've got a few questions coming through, so I'll answer them as they go. They're directed at me. As you always get with that. Mate, it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm wrapped that there's a now third option for people to look at. I've been screaming out for it.
No, there's a second option. You had Liberal Labor as one, and you
yes.
had One Nation as two.
Fair enough. It was a great conversation. I'm looking forward to having further conversations from One Nation with your state representatives down here. And I just, the biggest thing we've got to do, I think both state and federally, the biggest mission in front of anyone who's not aligned with the ALP is to get the ALP out of government. That is our first step.
Number one. So however we got to do that, we got to get it done. So, mate, I'm wishing you all the best. Pass on my best to Pauline. I think she's a legend. I love how well she stands strong. And I wish you all the very best for the future going forward. And hopefully we can reconnect again one day and chat again. Yep, certainly. And Pauline is the real deal.
Yeah. Oh, I think most people who followed her fairly closely would know that. So that's one area she and Trump share a lot. They get a lot of arrows slung at them, and they just keep standing. They keep coming, and that infuriates all those left indoctrinated minds. It just sends them spinning. I love it, mate. Thank you
for having me as your guest. Keep going on the podcast, and all the best.
Thanks, mate. Good night.
Good night, mate.
See you, buddy. I'll let you sign off and I'll answer these questions. All right, there it is. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that with Malcolm. I know, even though we spoke a long time, we don't address everything. I'm going to address a few of the comments. I've got one of my favorites, Judy. I had a quick look. I was busy speaking to Malcolm. I see you weren't happy with something, so we'll show it. And Judy's saying, so Bob, you like Jared for speaking down on a group you don't like, but now don't like him for speaking down on a group you do. No, not what I said. Judy, I said, personally, I'm a big believer on free speech. I didn't say about speaking down. In the Australian March for Australia, whatever you call it now, there's so many names for him. He was banned from speaking at the Brisbane event. So I disagree with that. I'm big on free speech, whether you agree with him or not. He shouldn't have been banned. That same group allowed NSN people to get up and speak. Jared should have been allowed to get up and speak. He was banned from speaking. Scott Challen, to his credit, allowed him to end up speaking, which caused the rift. So I didn't care who he was speaking down to or not up to. I just think he should have been allowed to speak. I have had, I've had exchanges with Jared on X that have been none too subtle. Jared's came at me, but I've come at Jared as well. But he should be able to have the right to speak. I don't appreciate some of the things he said recently, considering I stood up for his behalf to speak, the way he's spoken about Pauline Hanson and One Nation. I just didn't like it. So just trying to find out then of Malcolm as why there's that rift, which we didn't get much behind, but that's fair enough. But Jared does not like One Nation, and my only guess is, look, Jared, I think, he's one of the smartest policy minds in this country, but he is very much down the Groyper avenue with a lot of his opinions, the Zionist and all that. And if you dare speak up on, or are seen to speak up in favour of Israel or the Jews or whatever, you cop it. So, and yeah, we'll disagree on that, but he's welcome to come on here like everybody else is. Judy, you're welcome to come on here and have your voice if you ever want to. So I think I've proven that over the journey. There's a second comment here from you. Why did One Nation vote against the bill amendment, which would have watered down the freedom of speech censorship bill prior to final vote? And yes, I'm likely to vote no one day. Well, sorry, Judy. I have been asking for 2 weeks for people to provide me questions. If I had have seen that, I would have asked for it, but I didn't get that to the end. I hope I'm recalling the correct one. There was a vote. If my memory serves me right, is Pauline and Malcolm didn't even turn up to the chamber on a vote, but their explanation of it, well, there was no point because it was going to lose anyway. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, I listened to it. There was a big hoo-ha, big storm, and yeah, that was it. They certainly oppose the hate speech laws. I'm pretty confident in saying. If I'm wrong, I don't follow the Senate as much as I probably follow the lower house as much. But I think you can only go by their policy page and what Malcolm said. They're big proponents of free speech. So, shoot me. I wish you'd had it. If you had sent that question through earlier, I would have happily asked it. But no one sent me any questions. So it was just me and Malcolm. So we get them now. Let's have a look at a few others. Let's see what we've got. So, that's the restream. Sorry. So optimal toast. One Nation come across as approachable, which Liberal and Labor are certainly not. That's not entirely true. Come here. My dog's getting restless. Hold on one, guys. My dog's getting restless. I'll let him out. Be good. Don't bark. JJ? Sorry, guys. My German Shepherd's been sitting at my feet for nearly 3 hours. He needed to get out. And there's a plane flying overhead, so he'll bark his head off. One Nation, I actually had Luke Howarth, when he was part of the Liberal Party, sat down for an interview with me, as did George Christensen when he was part of the LNP. So One Nation are approachable. There's other, I had a great conversation with Jordan Ditloff from the Libertarians. So it's not just One Nation. There are a lot of, I won't say a lot, there are a number of good politicians that will speak to you, Malcolm being one of them. And as I said at the start of the show, Malcolm, at one stage, before I did any of this podcasting or stuff, on a personal issue, when I approached a number of politicians, he was one of the few to get back to me. So he's a good man, in my opinion. It's pretty obvious Labor want to drive us in the direction of the UK. It seems that way, doesn't it? early 80s, watching the Range train. Don't know what that is. I always love women's sport. Lots of love. Warrant officer yells, at ease. Get these feet further apart. Your guts won't fall out. I'll never join again. Not today. That's obviously a veteran talking about his time in the army. I'm not quite sure exactly what that was all referring to. And it timed it to Anzac Day. So that's you, Judy. I think you're talking about the arrest of Ben Roberts-Smith. Yeah, I think a lot of that sucks. So Judy in here, obviously we furiously agree, you, me and Malcolm. I stand with Ben Roberts-Smith. I think there's an awful lot of Australians doing that. What about people with a severe work injury denied treatment because specialists refused to see them because they weren't vaccinated? We certainly touched on that. Disgraceful. Channel 9's 700,000 hush money. Don't know what that's referring to. Is that about Ben Roberts-Smith? I don't know. I would never join a union again, ever. Sold out by one of the largest after a work injury, never again. And I was an unpaid delegate. I hear those stories all the time. I was only ever a member of a bank union. Total waste of money. We never went on strike. We never did anything. We're one of the lowest paid in the country. So they took our money and did nothing for us. So I'm with you on that one. Mr. Roberts, Malcolm. Okay, if you're referring to I called him Malcolm, I'm not too sure. For Eleanor, I asked him at the start of the interview how he would like to refer to, whether it was Senator Roberts, and he said, no, just call me Malcolm. So if that's what you're saying. Hugs, yeah, thank you. Sorry, same person said hugs. So obviously like what we're doing, I'm hoping. Try and get everyone who's put a thing. Jess Wilson, who thinks our free speech censorship should go harder. If you listen, Judy, again, I did say I like 50% of what Jess Wilson's done. So I think she has been a calmer voice. I never thought they should have got rid of Brad Batten. But I think she's like the captain of the Titanic. She's trying to do the right thing. I don't agree with everything she does. Some stuff I do agree with. For example, she wants to repeal the Indigenous Parliament in Victoria. Fantastic. There's other things there I agree with this. There's things like what you've just raised I disagree with. She would be far better for us than the ALP. I hope she's the next premier, just so we get rid of Jacinta Allen and the thing. I will be voting One Nation, but the Libs will get my second vote, despite how abysmal they really are. But she is not helped by the administration underneath her. She's not helped at all, and they're going to make sure we get the ALP again. There is my point. So Judy, as she always does, she's got a lot of comments here. Good on you, Judy. That was Liam. Yeah, what was his surname? Who confronted Bowen? If you haven't seen it, you should watch it today. It was fantastic. Judy again. Full independent audit of the $44 billion per year which we give. No problems giving what they need, but where's it all going? Is that about renewables or overseas aid? I'm not too sure. This is the problem when you're getting these at the end of a show. NSN never failed to talk about getting rid of Aborigines. They acknowledged they deserve to be here too. Okay. Did I say that? I don't think I said that. NSN talked about remigration and deportation, and they talk a lot about a wide Australia policy. So depends on which NSN person you speak to, but they're definitely white nationalists. That's fair enough. That's their opinion. I'm not of that opinion. So would prominent members of the NSN rate our Indigenous community alongside the white community? I don't think so. So we disagree on that one, Judy. And speak English. So I think that's talking about people coming to this country. They should learn English. If they don't know it, they should learn it. Most immigrants I speak to have got pretty good English. Some haven't. Most do. Most do the right thing. We bring them in immediately, promulgate them to victimhood category. That's wrong. Totally agree. I'm back. Thanks. I don't much about Chili con carne. I don't know what that means. Judy again. But the immigrant families are voting Labor in, and Labor pushes this white bad rhetoric. I agree with that to a degree. quite a large degree, I do. But there's a lot of immigrant families come in that see the wrongs of Labor too. I know a few of them, and they won't vote Labor. So it's not all that way. The problem is you've got a government, and I think this is both sides, Liberal and Labor, that bring immigration that they think will benefit them politically instead of worrying about what benefits the nation. If we had an immigration policy that worried purely and solely about benefiting the nation, we'd be in a lot better place. And we wouldn't be in this position where we're totally divided. I disagree. COVID woke up many, and no, Australia is not ready for a public. Well, we'll disagree there, Judy. March for Australia has done some good shit. You should learn about them, noting every person has their own view, but MFA is solid on the original message. Well, Judy, that is very interesting you say that, because I have invited Beck Freedom to come on to my podcast a number of times to discuss this very thing. I also had a part, and this is not his fault. What's his name? Joel, what's his name? The blonde guy just got out of prison. I can't remember him. Prominent NSN guy. A few people with NSN links were going to try and tee up an interview with me with him. Joel Davis. And I'd happily do that. I said all along I'm willing to speak to anyone. But all I can do is reach out and ask these people to come on. If they refuse to come on, I can't do much about it. So, Beck Freedom has had a number of chances now. We've exchanged on X. She's had a few digs at me, and I invited her to come on the program to do it. There was one recently where she was complaining to Ben Fordham that she couldn't get her back on the program. I sent her a message saying, well, if he won't let you on, you can come on mine. Happy for you to have a chat. Never heard anything back. So, Judy, if she wants to come on, or anybody, which I'm actually working on in the background, to get a spokesperson for whether there's any different, the Groiper movement. We're doing a special episode with a boomer, a Groiper, and an immigrant, which I'll think will be fantastic. That's my next project I'm working on. We'll certainly get a lot of message about the NSN, I'm sure, out of that. The Jared, so we're up to the Jared one again. We explained that. What's this one, Judy? God, you're getting a thing. Yes, they abstained at the final vote, but it's the answer to my other question that is after. I'm not sure what your other question is there, Jody. So if you can send it through quickly before I sign off, I'll try and answer it. Optimal Toast. Do enjoy listening to Malcolm. Cheers for having him on, and thanks to him for taking his time to come on the chat, which I think is brilliant. So, and this could be anybody. If it was an ALP person, to give up hours of your time to have that sort of conversation. And there was much more I wanted to speak about. 2 hours is not enough. But, people like, for him, he's a busy man. To give up, first up for his staff to approach me, to set up the meeting, for him to come on and give willingly 2 hours like that, I think is brilliant. That's credit to him. And everybody else, Jordan Ditloff who did it, Scott Challen who did it, anyone who does that, they earn my respect. That's one we just had. 44 billion to Aborigines, the Indigenous industry. Yes. Judy B, Joel Davis, not allowed on social media. Yeah, no, that's very true. So, yeah, good point, Judy. Hopefully, I would like to interview him. I think what happened to him was wrong. As you heard in the thing, I'm a big proponent of free speech. I think we should have a Bill of Rights. I think we should have a First Amendment. And if we had that, Joel Davis wouldn't have spent a day in jail. Simple as that, but we don't have that. So, and people have got to watch their P's and Q's. I suppose I do. I don't do much. I don't say the volatile things I think Joel does, but he should be able to say that. I mean, I looked up the term that he went to jail for, and it was a nothing term. What was it? Oh, God, I can't remember what it was. It included the something rape, but it's a common term that's used across the globe that people don't go to jail for. And Joel spent 133 days in jail while young, and they're not all immigrants, but there's a lot of young immigrants and a lot of young Aussie kids running our streets, running rampant, bashing people, stabbing people, breaking into houses, stealing cars, and they get out and bail. So, you're not going to get many arguments out of. I will argue ideologically with Joel. I will not stand by and say he deserved a prison time. I just totally disagree with that. So, Judy, the other question. Here we go. This is our last question. The other question was the first one you read about One Nation is why did they vote down amendments which would have watered down the censorship bill? I can't give you the answer to that. That's a pity I didn't get that question. I could have put that to Malcolm. Are you talking the social media ban for the kids? When you talk the censorship bill, or you're talking the hate speech laws? Rhetorically right. Yeah. Do a Google search on that. Thank you, Judy. Do a Google search on that, what it actually means. It means in an argument that you get on social media and you come on and you just pound them. This is my understanding of it, with comments. And it's an ugly term. I don't think you should use it, but that's up to the individual. There's probably a lot of terms I use on X that people would say are ugly that I shouldn't use, and they'd probably be right. But it's a matter of getting on in a debate where on X it's all posts and tweets, and you're gang up on them, so you're just hitting them with a message. I've been the victim of it. You just get a whole bunch of trolls coming at you, and what Joel tried to do was get all his followers to come on, and this individual, was it the Allegra Spender or one of the politicians, to get on a feed and just go gang ho. And it's a social media version of bullying, I suppose. Is that a jailable offence? I don't think so. And how many times, if that's an offence, is it similar an offence for a politician to cut out their comments? Now, when it crosses over that it becomes threats, then maybe that's where the line in free speech becomes an issue. Now, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, a lot of people, after what Joel said, did come on and make threats. Then if they've made threats, like personal threats, I'm going to bash you, stab you, kill you, rape, well, then that's going too far, and then there should be repercussions. I don't think that's what Joel did, and if I'm wrong on that, people can tell me. I don't know enough about it. But if he went to jail for those two words for 133 days and missed the birth of his first child, I think that's going too far. And I'm ideologically opposed to virtually everything Joel Davis says. So Joel would be a big supporter of the White Australia policy. I'm not. Joel would be a big supporter of a lot of the Nazi policy. I'm not. Joel will be rabidly against the Jewish nation. I'm not. So there's a lot of things there I disagree, but I can have Joel on the show and talk to him about it. Malcolm, who we just had on, is totally opposed to a republic. I'm for a republic. We can have differing opinions without having to go to jail for them. Anyway. Yeah, no, I got you, Jody. Lots of love. If you asked me what the other question I was explaining, it was the earlier question. Yeah, I know it was the earlier question. I just don't know the legislation you're talking about that you're saying. What did you say? They didn't. You read about one. Why did they vote down amendments? So someone, whether it was the Liberals or someone, put up some amendments to some legislation to water it down. So what that legislation, was it the hate speech laws in January, or was it the social media laws from last year? I'm just not too sure which legislation you're talking through. If it was the social media, they didn't probably vote down amendments because they weren't in the chamber. I don't know about the hate speech laws. They charged Joel with using a carriage service to harass. I agree, he didn't deserve what they did to him. Even if he was guilty of an offence, surely it's a fine. Surely it's not 133 days in jail. I mean, here's the double standard, and this is what I think people get pissed off with. The double standard is, I'm pretty confident, as we don't have trust in this system anymore, that if a radical Islamist said something similar to somebody, they would get away with it. They wouldn't spend a day in jail. Because Joel is part of NSN and he's all about white nationalism, they come down on him like a ton of bricks. That's the double standard we get. Now, you can you can disagree with someone, you can debate them. This is why we should have free speech, the right to have an opinion, the right to have a debate, the right to even assemble with people we don't think they should assemble. I don't like a lot of the leftists. They had a Marxist convention in Melbourne. Should they be allowed to have that? I violently disagree with the Marxists. But if they want to get together and talk their bullshit, good luck to them. I'm just not going to go there. I'll go to the footy instead. You shouldn't be going to jail for that stuff. We got someone different. So optimal toast. Not that long ago, people said something like that. You'd think they'd they're a flog. Maybe say as much and move on. Now we imprison people for it. Disgusting we've fallen this far, 100%. And this is what I was trying to say to Malcolm about having a republic, is you could bring in a new constitution which has a Bill of Rights, which has a First Amendment, which protects our right to speech. If you try to get that through now, it would get voted down every single time, twice on Sundays. I think Malcolm needs, and every centre-right conservative needs to start, and I'm going to keep pushing this, I think they need to start embracing a republic and have a new constitution, a better constitution. I'm not saying get rid of everything. The other part I will disagree with Malcolm on, and this is fine, we're allowed to have disagreements, is I don't think the preferential system works in the nation's interests. It keeps getting the arseholes voted in. And you see it time and again. South Australian election, if you had first past the post, there probably would have been another couple of One Nation MPs in both the upper and lower house. Is preferential, and the reason the preferentials supported by the minor parties is it does help them get their members elected. But is that in the national interest? Unless those members from the minor parties have a balance of power situation, or they're a member of a coalition that can either stop bad legislation or pass good legislation, they're really a spectator in our parliaments. And if Malcolm's being fair, even One Nation at the moment, though I think it'll change in the next few elections, in our federal parliament, a lot of the time, they're spectators. If they oppose the hate speech laws went through. We talked about the legislation or the amendment they put forward to protecting children who survive abortion. It went through. They didn't stop it. So at the moment, even though, they might win a few seats because of the preferential system, are we winning enough seats to impact on legislation and the way government impacts on our lives? The answer to that is no, we're not at the moment. So hopefully a lot of people wake up. I'm not confident of that. Or you change the system. And the part that I think people have got to start listening to, and this is why I push the republic, ALP will push a republic down our throat. There is nothing more certain than that in my book. We will get a republic one way or the other. So if we're going to get a republic, let's get a republic built on conservative values that embrace freedoms, protects the rights of individuals, including the unborn, and actually gives us the country we can believe in, respect, and defend. I don't think we've got that at the moment in our current system. I'll keep arguing that because that's what I passionately believe, even if I'm in the minority, which I think I am at the moment. Optimal toast. I'm starting to like optimal toast. I'm for a republic after the Queen's passing. Charles is an impotent do-nothing, but still not sold it's the right time with the political environment right now. Maybe I'll change my mind. I would agree. It's not the right time while Labor in power. I tell you, it's the right time would be in the run-up to an election is to grab that policy and run with it in that election campaign, because you take that policy away from the ALP and then you've got something you could try and win an election with. That's a very big policy announcement. I'm a little bit surprised at the reluctance of those on the right to embrace it. It's not against conservatism. In America, Trump is a conservative. He doesn't live in a constitution that has a monarchy, even if it's a constitutional monarchy, as Malcolm described it, which is different from an absolute monarchy. I just think it would be a benefit. Optimal surprised. ALP hasn't pushed for a republic yet. It was on Albo's cards. After the next election, it will be. I guarantee you in the next election, Albo will have it. This is why I'm saying the Conservatives should grab it before he does. Anyway, I don't think I'm going to win that one, but I'll keep trying. That's enough from me for one day. I think that was a great interview. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on X. Right now, I've got a dog out there that desperately needs a walk. It's already 7 o'clock, so we've been going well over 3 hours. To those who followed, thank you very much. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow me on X. And thank you, Optimal Toast and Judy B, especially Judy, you're a legend. We'll disagree on a few things, but the fact you get on here and you contribute is what Malcolm was talking about, was people getting involved electorally and getting involved in democracy, becoming active democratically. So me, by hosting this, hopefully gives you some information, but by you guys giving me chats and questions, you're contributing to that as well. So I really do appreciate it. Anyway, that's enough for one day. I hope you've enjoyed it. and onwards and upwards to our next one. We do have a few more One Nation people that have expressed an interest. Hopefully we can get them on board and talk to them. I think it's really important we give One Nation a platform to express their policy ideas. We always hear about Labor, National and Liberal. We don't hear much, especially here in Victoria, about One Nation. So time for that. Last one, Optimal. Cheers to the podcast. Glad I came across it. Hope everyone has a good night. Take care all. Great way to finish. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.